Chapter 906. Zhang Xin looked disdainfully at the madly charging Demu. Taking a small step back, he easily dodged Demu's attack. Raising his right leg, he ferociously smashed it against Demu's lower abdomen. Under the huge inertia, Demu fell to the ground and rolled a dozen meters away. Pung! Without waiting for Demu to get up, Zhang Xin had already arrived before Demu. Next, he kicked Demu's throat. As blood sprayed out from Demu's mouth, Demu's neck tilted and he died on the spot. Victory! 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 Deafening cheers sounded from the Reincarnation Immortal City's army. The millions of War Elephant Corps members were stunned. They looked at the corpse of their general and did not react for a long time. Charge! Zhang Xin pulled out his long spear and jumped onto his horse. He squeezed his horse's abdomen and charged towards the War Elephant Corps. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, Zhang Lan, Chu Yi, and the other generals looked at each other and smiled. They then raised their weapons and shouted, "Charge! Kill! Kill! Kill!" Deafening roars sounded from the Reincarnation Immortal City's army. In the next second, Zhang San, Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Li Yuanba, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the other generals led the charge towards the War Elephant Corps. The army of Reincarnation Immortal City followed closely behind without hesitation. Rumble. 10,000 horses galloped and the earth rumbled. 41 million Reincarnation Immortal City's army charged towards the War Elephant Corps with an unstoppable momentum. Not far away, the Eastern players who saw this scene were stunned. What? What the heck? War horses charging against the War Elephant? Aren't they looking for trouble? Yeah, I don't understand either. If they charge over like this, they won't be able to charge at the War Elephant. They might even be kicked away by the elephant's leg. They are not on the same level. I don't think it's that simple. It's obvious that the generals under Yiyu of Gojoseon don't know this. Since they dare to charge, they must be confident. I think so too. In Tintu's camp, the War Elephant Corps, which was in chaos because their general was killed, was stunned when they saw the Reincarnation Immortal City's army charging towards them. At this moment, the deputy general of the War Elephant Corps' eyes lit up. He raised his weapon and shouted, "War Elephant invincible! Kill!" As soon as the War Elephant Corps' deputy general finished speaking, the soldiers of the War Elephant Corps all realized one thing. What is there to be afraid of? I am riding a war elephant. After coming back to their senses, the soldiers of the War Elephant Legion all regained their courage. They raised their weapons and loudly shouted, "Let's go! Kill! 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 Kill!" In the next second, the soldiers of the War Elephant Corps controlled their war elephants and charged towards the army of Reincarnation Immortal City in a frenzy. 10,000 elephants galloped, and the earth rumbled. The players at the back of the Reincarnation Immortal City's army widened their eyes when the violent War Elephant Corps charged. F***CK. Yi Chen's army is in danger. Yeah, the War Elephant Corps didn't charge just now. Now that they are charging, whoever stands in their way will be trampled to death. No, they will be trampled into meat paste. Damn, what is Yi Chen trying to do? If he is defeated, the East won't be able to withstand the War Elephant Corps. Damn, this thing is a killing machine on the battlefield. It's terrible when attacking cities. While the players were talking among themselves, Zhang San, Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, and the other generals at the front of the Reincarnation Immortal City's army waved their right hands in unison. Magic treasure level long swords instantly appeared in their hands. In the next second, Zhang San, Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, and the other military generals opened their eyes and shouted, "Mounted archery!" As soon as they shouted, the Reincarnation Immortal City's army changed their weapons to bows and arrows. Then, they drew their bows and shot at the War Elephant Corps without hesitation. Swish! Swish! At the same time, Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Zhang San, Guan Er, and the other generals all raised their magic treasure level swords and shouted, "Green Lotus Sword Technique!" As soon as they shouted, dozens of green lotuses appeared in the air. Then, A large amount of green sword energy that was hundreds of meters long exploded from the green lotuses and shot at the war elephant core rapidly. In the next second, the sound of bodies being cut apart instantly rang out in an extremely concentrated manner. Swish, 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 swish. Then, the war elephants that were charging at the reincarnation of Mortal City's army were cut into dozens of pieces and died on the spot. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of explosions, the war elephants that had just died were all blasted into pieces of flesh and blood. In the distance, the Eastern players who saw this scene were stunned. Then, they couldn't help but widen their eyes. Damn, what kind of technique is this? Why is it so overpowered? How would I know? But now, I understand why Yi Qin's army dares to charge at the war elephants with war horses. Yi Yu of Gojoseon's army is really overpowered. Look, that arrow isn't right. Just as the players looked at the war elephant corps that was charging at Tintu, the arrow shot by the reincarnation Immortal City's army landed in the middle of the charging war elephant corps. Swish, 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 swish. The sound of arrows piercing through the bodies of the soldiers of the war elephant corps was heard densely. Then they saw the war elephant corps soldiers still riding on their war elephants. Without exception, their bodies were penetrated by the arrows shot by the reincarnation Immortal City's army. Then they stopped charging. In an instant, millions of Tennis soldiers were killed on the spot. Their war elephants, without exception, were shot through with dozens of bowl-sized holes, the kind that had been penetrated. Fresh blood spurted out, intestines flowed out, and the war elephants wailed. They instantly appeared in the midst of the war elephant corps of Tintu. Then, the charging mode of the war elephant corps of Tintu quickly stopped. It was difficult for them not to stop. Many of the war elephants on the battlefield died, but more of them were crippled by the arrows. On the battlefield that was filled with war elephant corpses or dying war elephants, the war elephants that weren't dead couldn't continue charging. Bam, bam, bam. After a series of collisions, the war elephant corps' charge was completely interrupted. Why? Why is it like this? Save me. Save me. I don't want to die. They're demons. Demons. The soldiers of Tinta discussed one after another, and then they broke down. It was difficult for them not to collapse. One had to know that the war elephants that they were proud of were like paper in front of the reincarnation Immortal City army. Not only could they not withstand a single blow, but nearly half of them were crippled. And it was only a wave of attack from the reincarnation Immortal City army that caused this scene. In the face of such a cruel reality, how could the Tinta soldiers not be afraid? How could they not be terrified? Rumble. Thousands of horses galloped and the earth rumbled. The reincarnation Immortal City army that was still charging once again drew their bows and released a wave of arrow rain that made the Tinta soldiers despair. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The arrows pierced through the air and exploded densely. Poochie, poochie, poochie. The arrows penetrated the bodies mercilessly and cruelly. Another wave of arrow rain attack came and took away the lives of millions of Tinta soldiers and crippled millions of war elephants. A strong smell of blood erupted from the battlefield and then spread out directly, just like hell. Rumble. Thousands of horses galloped and the earth rumbled. The reincarnation Immortal City army came into contact with the war elephant legion of Tintu. Although the carcasses of the war elephants were everywhere, the reincarnation Immortal City army was not affected at all. They continued to charge, and their speed did not decrease at all. This was because the ones leading the way were Zhao Yun, Zhang San, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, and other famous historical generals who had learned the chaotic level cultivation technique, Green Lotus Sword technique. The reincarnation Immortal City army galloped all the way and killed everyone they met. They did not stop after a single shot. An hour later, the reincarnation Immortal City army chased through the battlefield and left behind a ground full of dead bodies and a blood-red land that was constantly flowing with a river of blood. A strong wind blew and the strong smell of blood directly surged and then blew into the interior of Tintu. At this moment, a world announcement suddenly sounded. Ding! The general of the Imperial Cavalry of the Great Han Dynasty, Yi Chun, defeated the War Elephant Legion of Tintu and broke through the border of Tintu. The world announcement was repeated 3 times in a row and instantly blew up the entire world channel. What the heck? Yi Yu of Gojoseon is really awesome. He even destroyed the War Elephant Legion of Tintu. He's really awesome. Yi Yu of Gojoseon is mighty. Do you have any likes for Yi Yu of Gojoseon? 1 like for me to pick herbs for an hour. Once Yi Yu of Gojoseon makes a move, you will know whether it's true or not. The War Elephant Legion of Tintu is just an ant-like existence in the eyes of Yi Yu of Gojoseon. Come, I'll give you 10,000 likes and let you pick herbs until you die. No matter how awesome and arrogant Tintu is, it was still destroyed by Yi Yu of Gojoseon. It seems that it won't be long before Yi Yu of Gojoseon's cavalry can rush into the capital of Tintu and destroy the entire country. Do you have any more likes for Yi Yu of Gojoseon? Those likes for Yi Yu of Gojoseon are all 18 centimeters tall and can last for 3 hours at night. Yi Yu of Gojoseon is mighty. He punched the bandits and trampled on Tintu. He's really a role model for us players. It's worth learning. That's enough. Tintu is still waiting for me to destroy it. I'll hurry to Tintu and help Yi Yu of Gojoseon. In the Reincarnation Immortal City, Yi Chun glanced at the world channel that kept refreshing and smiled faintly. At this moment, the system's notification suddenly sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chun for obtaining 20% of Tintu's providence. As soon as the system's notification ended, Yi Chun couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Sure enough, just like attacking the border, as long as he could destroy the enemy and occupy their territory, he could gradually obtain the enemy's providence. Thinking of this, Yi Chun directly sent a telepathic message to his generals. Let's go. Destroy all villages. Destroy all villages. Destroy all cities. Yes, Lord. Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, and the other generals bowed and saluted in unison. Then they led the 41 million soldiers of the Reincarnation Immortal City into the interior of Tintu. Dragon-subduing city was the first city in the hinterland of Tintu that was used for both attack and defense. The terrain was extremely dangerous and shaped like a fan. Except for a narrow road in the valley, there were high cliffs on both sides. It was like a man in front of 10,000 men. In addition, there were 600,000 elite soldiers guarding Dragon-subduing city. It definitely wouldn't be easy to take it down. Moreover, the general guarding Dragon-subduing city was Tintu's #1 general, Bailu Mu. Whether it was wisdom or fame, he was higher than Mu. With him guarding here, it would be even harder to take down the city. Report dash. A scout quickly knelt down in front of Bailu Mu and reported, General, the War Elephant Corps has been completely annihilated. No one survived. What? The War Elephant Corps has been completely annihilated? Bailu Mu's expression changed. Yes. The scout nodded and said, even General Mu was killed on the spot. Damn, Mu that trash. Bailu Mu couldn't help but curse. After calming down, he asked, where's the Great Han Army now? The Great Han Army is heading here. I'm afraid, the scout paused and muttered, they will be here soon. Before he finished speaking, Bailu Mu raised his eyes and saw a large number of Great Han cavalry appear in the valley outside Dragon-subduing city. If not for the limited area of the valley, he could imagine the scene of 1 million soldiers descending upon the city. Bailu Mu looked at the cavalry in the valley with a layer of worry on his face. Then, he ordered his subordinates behind him. Pass down the order, prepare for battle. We must guard the only entrance into our country. Also, inform the leader that we request reinforcements. Yes. Hearing this, the confidant left with the order. Yi Chun, who was in charge of Reincarnation Immortal City, used his divine sense to scan Dragon-subduing city. Compared to the wide area on the border, Dragon-subduing city's terrain was difficult to attack and was easy to defend. Of course, the most important thing was that there was only a 1 zhang wide path from the city gate to the valley. This kind of width was unable to allow the reincarnation Immortal City's soldiers to charge in. If they were to use force, even if the reincarnation Immortal City soldiers had spirit artifact grade armor, it would be hard to guarantee that they wouldn't be shot in the eyes, face, and other important parts. Thinking of this, Yichen sent a message to Zhang San through his divine sense. Ida, are you confident in taking down the city? Lord, although dragons subduing city's terrain is difficult and the path to the city gate is only 10 zhang, I am confident in taking down the city. Good. Hearing this, Yichen laughed and sent a message. Since that's the case, you will take down the city. Yes, Lord. Master. Zhang San was overjoyed when he heard this. He immediately bowed at the reincarnation Immortal Island. Chapter 907. After hearing Zhang San's words, Yichen nodded with a smile, and then sent a voice transmission. Let's begin. Although the dragon's subduing city of Tintu was easy to defend and difficult to attack, it was not a problem for Yichen. After all, Yichen's realm was right here. If he wanted to break through the city, Yichen could slap him and raise the dragon's subduing city to the ground. However, Yichen was not prepared to do so. As for the reason, it was very simple. Yichen wanted to train his troops, but he also wanted to cultivate subordinates who could fight well and soldiers who were not afraid of anything. Only with such subordinates and soldiers could Yichen show off his strength in the great wasteland world and then rise to power. In other words, Yichen could not do everything by himself, right? Then what was the point of creating a dynasty of destiny? What was the point of fighting for hegemony? He could just fly alone. It was for this reason that Yichen had only made a single move when he was trying to capture Su Fu back at the riverside. As soon as Yichen's words fell, Zhang San nodded heavily and then cupped his fists in the direction of the reincarnation Immortal Island. Yes, my lord. After Zhang San finished speaking, he immediately looked at one of the captains of the 100,000 troops he commanded and shouted, Tainyo, lead your men and follow me into the valley. Yes, General. When the captain named Tainyo heard this, he hurriedly stepped out of the ranks and bowed loudly. After that, he led 10,000 soldiers and followed Zhang San into the valley. After arriving at the narrow passage that had to be passed through to attack the city, Zhang San couldn't help but frown. He then looked at Tainyo behind him and said, Take 300 people and follow me in. The rest of you, stand by at any time. Yes, General. When Tainyo heard this, he hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed in response. Then, he ordered 300 soldiers and followed Zhang San into the narrow passage. Just as they were about to enter the maximum range of the soldiers on the city wall of the dragon's subduing city, Zhang San stopped and raised his hand and shouted, Get ready. As soon as Zhang San's words fell, the 300 soldiers who had entered the narrow passageway clenched their spears, while the 9,700 soldiers outside the narrow passageway held their longbows in their giant hands and then pulled their bows and arrows, aiming at the tinted soldiers on the walls of the dragon subduing city. Dragon subduing city. Reinforcements have arrived. The messenger's voice suddenly came from afar, coming closer and closer, again and again. When Bailu Mu's trusted aide heard this, he hurriedly rushed to the city walls and reported to Bailu Mu. General, the reinforcements are here. Reinforcements are here? Hearing this, Bailu Mu's eyes lit up. How many people? 1,800,000. Bailu Mu's confidant hastily said, So many soldiers? Bailu Mu was stunned when he heard his subordinates report. He didn't expect there to be so many reinforcements. Originally, he didn't have much hope in asking for reinforcements. After all, time was too short. Who would have thought that not only would reinforcements arrive, but they would also reach a huge number of 8 million. After regaining his wits, Bailu Mu couldn't help but throw his head back and laugh wildly. Good, good. This time, Dragon Subduing City will definitely be defended. Those damned Great Han soldiers will definitely lose their lives in Dragon Subduing City. Dragon Subduing City was already easy to defend and hard to attack. Now that there were so many soldiers, How could Beilumu's confidence not explode? At this moment, Beilumu suddenly thought of something and hurriedly asked his confidant, "Where did these 8 million soldiers come from? How strong are they?" "General, please be at ease." His confidant immediately said, "These 8 million soldiers are all from the surrounding border cities. They're stationed in the border cities all year round and are trained every day. They're definitely first-rate soldiers." Hearing this, Beilumu completely relaxed and nodded. "Pass down the order, have the 8 million soldiers gather in the city and prepare to meet the enemy." "Yes." Beilumu's confidant hurriedly bowed and hurriedly left to pass down Beilumu's order. With 8 million reinforcements, not only did Beilumu relax, even the Tianju soldiers in dragon-subduing city had their confidence greatly increased. Then, like heifers practicing handstands, they looked at Zhang San and the 300 reincarnation immortal city soldiers who were outside the range of the arrows and cursed and ridiculed. "Damn great Han army. Although we don't know what kind of scheme you used to slaughter our war elephant corps, but don't even think about passing through here. As long as we're here, don't even think about passing through. Right now, we already have 8 million reinforcements. You want to break through our dragon-subduing city with just this little bit of troops? What a joke. Don't look at how you destroyed our war elephant corps. We will definitely take revenge on you. At that time, not only will we destroy you, but we will also destroy your entire Great Han dynasty. We will kill all the men and snatch all the women." "All right, right. I heard that the women of the Great Han dynasty are all full of life. When the time comes, we can snatch a few of them and make them our concubines. Wouldn't that be great? Hee hee. Brothers, stop talking. I feel like I can't take it anymore." Ha ha. Mockery and complacent words echoed incessantly on the city walls. "Wait until I break through the city. I will definitely kill all of you bastards." Zhang San glared fiercely at the Tianju soldiers on the city walls and shouted. The soldier who was saved felt a warmth in his heart and then bowed loudly to Zhang San. Hearing this, Zhang San's dark face chuckled and then he shouted, "Kill more Tianju bastards later. Do you hear me?" "Yes, General. General." The soldier whose life had been saved by Zhang San looked at Zhang San with eyes full of gratitude before opening his mouth to shout. When Zhang San heard this, he immediately turned his head and shouted, "Charge!" After Zhang San roared, he jumped up from his warhorse. After landing, the mortal evolution state's innate true chi instantly poured into his legs. In the next second, Zhang San stomped on the ground fiercely. After a bang, Zhang San turned into an afterimage and rushed to the city gate alley. "Break for me!" After Zhang San shouted, the snake spear in his hand instantly flashed with a green light and then fiercely hacked at the dragon-subduing city gate. With a loud bang, the dragon-subduing city's 10,000 gene city gate instantly exploded, and then iron and wood shavings flew all over the sky. "The city gate has been broken. Soldiers, follow me to kill the enemy." Zhang San shouted loudly. Then, carrying the long spear, he directly charged into the city. The 300 reincarnation immortal city soldiers behind him heard this and began to speed up. They followed closely behind Zhang San and rushed into the dragon-subduing city. In the next second, the 9,700 soldiers that Zhang San left outside the narrow passage rushed into the narrow passage and rushed into the dragon-subduing city in a few breaths of time. In the valley, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the other generals looked at each other, then raised the weapons in their hands and shouted, "Kill! Kill! Kill! Kill!" An earth-shattering roar instantly sounded. In the next second, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the others took the lead and led the reincarnation Immortal City's army towards the dragon-subduing city. Although there was a narrow passage as a restriction, the reincarnation Immortal City's army was not weak. The Samsara Legion's white horses were all mortal evolution state. Therefore, Not only was the speed of the reincarnation Immortal City's army fast, even if they were attacked, they could easily defend against it. Of course, this was all thanks to Zhang San and his soldiers breaking through the city. If they hadn't distracted the attention of the Tianzhu soldiers, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, and Guan Air soldiers wouldn't have been heavily injured and their attack speed slowed down. However, it was inevitable that some soldiers would have accidents. Time passed bit by bit. More and more reincarnation Immortal City soldiers rushed out of the narrow passage and into the dragon subduing city. Chapter 908. Dragon subduing city on the city walls. Report. One of Bailu Mu's personal guards hurriedly ran in front of him and knelt down. General, it's bad. The city gates have been breached by the enemy. Ha! Bailu Mu, who was watching the army of reincarnation Immortal City charge into the city with an ashen face, slapped his personal guard's face with the back of his hand when he heard this. I'm not blind, I can see. He was personally commanding the battle from the city tower. If he didn't even see the city gates being breached, how could he fight? Yes. The personal guard who had been slapped did not care about the pain from his swollen left cheek and hurriedly nodded in response. Pass down the order. Bailu Mu glanced at the personal guard and sternly shouted, all soldiers, meet the enemy head-on. We must annihilate all the enemies within the city. We must not let the Great Han army pass through our dragon subduing city. Yes, General. Hearing this, the personal guard hurriedly cupped his fists and quickly walked down the city walls. He passed down Bailu Mu's order to the generals who were at a loss. As the military orders were passed down one after another, the millions of soldiers in the city, who were still in a state of panic, instantly found their backbone. Then, like a tide, they surged toward the city gate. Very quickly, the Tianzhu army within the dragon subduing city met the army of reincarnation Immortal City. Kill! Seeing the countless enemies charging over, Zhang San's eyes widened in anger and he roared. After saying that, Zhang San took the lead and charged towards the enemy. Zhang San's subordinates followed closely behind as they charged towards the enemy. Zhao Yun saw this and immediately looked at Guan Air, Dian Xiong, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the other generals. He then shouted, leave the city walls to me. After Zhao Yunzheng finished shouting, he immediately brought 100 personal guards and rushed towards the city walls of the dragon subduing city. On the city walls of the dragon subduing city, there were still many defenders of the dragon subduing city. If they were allowed to stay on the city walls, the army of the reincarnation Immortal City would definitely be continuously shot by arrows. Otherwise, Zhao Yunzheng would not have said that. Guan Air, Dian Xiong, Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, and the other generals looked at each other and smiled when they saw Zhao Yun bringing people up the city walls. They then raised their weapons and shouted, kill the enemy. Heaven-shaking battle cries instantly rang out. Kill! 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 In the next second, Guan Air, Dian Xiong, Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, and the other generals brought their own troops and charged towards the enemy. In the blink of an eye, the sound of weapons colliding, the sound of war horses colliding, the sound of weapons piercing through the body, and the sound of weapons slicing through the body appeared all at once. Then it spread out on the streets of Dragon subduing city. The defenders of the Dragon subduing city were killed one after another, sent flying, and sent flying. No matter how many of them there were, no matter how dense they were unable to stop the advance of the army of Reincarnation Immortal City. At this moment, the soldiers of Reincarnation Immortal City were filled with fighting spirit and killing intent. Each and every one of them turned into tigers and wolves that mercilessly tore apart everything in front of them. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the main street leading to the broken city gate was completely emptied. All that was left was the corpses that littered the ground and the river of blood that flowed past their feet. On the city wall, Zhao Yunzheng, who brought his subordinates to the city wall ramp, instantly attracted the attention of the dragon subduing city guard stationed here. However, before they could react, the long spear in Zhao Yunzheng's hand turned into afterimages that filled the sky and pierced over. The sound of more than 10 bodies being pierced instantly rang out. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. More than 10 soldiers of Dragon's subduing city, without exception, were all killed on the spot by Zhao Yun's spear. Attack! Kill him! When a centurion saw this, his face immediately changed, and then he pointed his weapon at Zhao Yun and roared. The soldiers of Dragon's subduing city, who were originally frightened by Zhao Yun's attack, after hearing the order, all of them subconsciously rushed toward Zhao Yun. Zhao Yun saw this and sneered. The courage of Dragon's silver spear in his right hand swept across. Bang, bang, bang. After a series of collisions, dozens of Dragon's subduing city's guards were directly swept away by Zhao Yun, and then, in mid-air, they vomited blood and died. Zhao Yun, who had killed dozens of soldiers in one strike, did not even look at the soldiers who had been killed, and directly stepped forward, the courage of Dragon's silver spear in his hand, continuously brandishing it. Poochie, 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 bang, bang, bang. The soldiers of Dragon's subduing city were constantly stabbed to death and sent flying. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Yichin brought his subordinates and rushed up the city wall of Dragon subduing city. Behind him, on the 100 steps of the city wall, there were corpses all over the ground. Just as Zhao Yun was about to climb up the city wall, hundreds of sharp sounds of something tearing through the air could be heard. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It was the Dragon's subduing city soldiers who had already sensed Zhao Yun's presence on the city wall and released their arrows. If it wasn't for the restrictions of the terrain, the arrows that shot toward Zhao Yun would not be just a few hundred, but thousands and tens of thousands. Sensing the incoming arrows, Zhao Yun's eyes immediately focused. The courage of Dragon's silver spear in his right hand instantly formed a silver white light screen. Ding, 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 ding. An incomparably dense collision sound rang out. And then, the hundreds of arrows that were shot toward Zhao Yun were not only blocked, but also flew back at an even faster speed. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. The sound of hundreds of arrows piercing through the body instantly rang out. And then, the Dragon subduing city soldiers who had just shot at Zhao Yun with their bows and arrows, without exception, were all pierced through their heads by the arrows they had just shot out and then died on the spot. Zhao Yun's incomparably tyrannical attack instantly scared the Dragon subduing city's soldiers who were not far away. The ones who had just attacked Zhao Yun were all the elite soldiers of Dragon subduing city. But in the end, in a single exchange, everyone was killed, and it was a simple and crude one. This kind of result was something that they had never thought of. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so shocked. Just as the surrounding soldiers were in shock, a low shout that contained anger suddenly sounded out. Zhao Yun! The one who shouted for Zhao Yun was none other than Beilu Mu, the general of the Dragon subduing city. When Zhao Yun heard this, he looked at Beilu Mu and asked coldly, "You know me?" "I've heard of it." Beilu Mu's eyes were filled with venom as he said sinisterly, "But you'll die here today." As soon as he finished speaking, Beilu Mu's feet slammed against the wall, and he raised his large blade and rushed at Zhao Yun. Just as he was about to reach Zhao Yun, Beilu Mu pushed off the ground and leapt high into the air. At the same time, Beilu Mu raised his large blade and viciously chopped down at Zhao Yun's head. In that instant, the blade light exploded and killing intent surged. It was clear that this was Beilu Mu's strongest attack. When Zhao Yun saw this, he stabbed out with the courage of Dragon's silver spear in his right hand without hesitation. With a poochie sound, the courage of Dragon's silver spear effortlessly pierced through Beilu Mu's head. In the next second, Zhao Yun's right hand shook, and Beilu Mu's head exploded with a bang, splattering red and white everywhere. The general's dead. The general's dead. Quick, run. The general's dead. After a brief moment of shock, the Dragon subduing city soldiers on the city walls let out ear-piercing screams. Then, they frantically ran off into the distance. Running away wasn't a big deal, but their shouts crushed the last of the remaining Dragon subduing city soldiers' nerves. Beilu Mu was the general guarding the city. If he died, and his subordinates shouted for him to die, this was a huge taboo on the battlefield. Once this happened, morale would definitely plummet, and morale would definitely fall. Once an army was in such a state, it would be difficult to fight again. At this moment, the dragon-subduing city army that had been chilled to the bone by reincarnation Immortal City's army collapsed when they heard Bailu Mu's death. Run, run. I don't want to fight anymore. I want to go home. Out of the way. Out of the way. The remaining dragon-subduing city soldiers shouted and cursed one after another, then pushed and shoved as they rushed out of the city. Their thoughts were good, but reality was cruel, because there were too many soldiers on the street. Wanting to turn around and leave was simply wishful thinking. When Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the other generals saw this, they looked at each other and led their respective armies to disperse within the dragon-subduing city. What they wanted to do was very simple, and that was to let the Tintus soldiers escape from the soaring dragon city, because their lord, Yi Chun, had given the order to kill without mercy. At this moment, all the generals under Yi Chun directly used their strongest attacks, and then led their soldiers to mercilessly reap the lives of the dragon-subduing city soldiers. As for Chu Yi, Gaolon, and Zhang He, they directly led their troops and killed their way to the other 3 city gates of the dragon-subduing city. After that, they completely blocked the city gates, preventing the Tintus soldiers from successfully escaping. Time passed bit by bit. The Tintus soldiers in the dragon-subduing city were directly killed by the reincarnation Immortal City's army until they began to collapse. Unfortunately, their pleas for mercy were not accepted because all the soldiers knew one thing. That was their lord, Yi Chun, was here to destroy the country and leave no one alive. Chapter 909. An hour later, the millions of soldiers in dragon-subduing city were all killed in the city without exception. As far as the eye could see, there were corpses everywhere, scarlet everywhere. In addition, there were broken limbs and round heads mixed in the blood of the corpses. It was a picture of purgatory on earth. Terrifying, bloody, terrifying, and chilling. This was the true portrayal of dragon-subduing city at this moment. At this point, dragon-subduing city was broken, and millions of city guards were all annihilated. In reincarnation Immortal City, Yi Chun, whose divine sense enveloped the entire dragon-subduing city, saw this and nodded in satisfaction. Then he sent a sound transmission to Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Yi, Guan Er, Zhang San, and Zhang San. Split up and sweep through Tintu. Along the way, destroy the villages, destroy the towns, and destroy the cities. Yes, sir. When Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, Huang Sheng, and the other generals heard this, they all bowed towards reincarnation Immortal City that was floating in the sky. In the next second, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, Huang Sheng, and the other generals all brought their subordinates and left dragon-subduing city. When the army of reincarnation Immortal City, whose bodies were stained with the blood of the enemy, arrived outside the city, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, Huang Sheng, and the other generals automatically divided into 8 groups. Then, they directly went in 4 directions, fanned out, and rushed towards the hinterland of Tintu. Rumble, rumble, 10,000 horses galloped, and the earth rumbled. Wherever the army of reincarnation Immortal City passed, smoke and dust billowed, and a fishy wind blew. In less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they disappeared without a trace. Not long after the army of reincarnation Immortal City left, a large group of players rushed to dragon-subduing city. When the players entered dragon-subduing city and saw the corpses on the streets of dragon-subduing city, as well as the blood that was constantly flowing, all of them immediately widened their eyes. Damn, I'm late. Yi Yu of Gojoseon destroyed dragon-subduing city. F***CK. So what if it's destroyed? What's there to pity? Don't tell me you want to compete with Yi Yu of Gojoseon to kill the soldiers of Tintu? Let's first look at the corpses all over the city, and then think about whether we should do it or not. F***CK. I was just saying. Even if I had a few hundred more guts, I wouldn't dare to steal Yi Yu of Gojoseon's monster. Hee hee. I think this is pretty good. I don't know if you guys have heard, but the folding edge that was destroyed by Yi Yu of Gojoseon has become a place for us Eastern players to kill monsters for leisure. Ha ha ha, I know about that. They've been wiped out by Yi Yu of Gojoseon many times, and their strength has been greatly reduced. As long as they come online, they'll immediately be killed by us Eastern players. Not only is it simple, but it's also effortless. We can also gain a lot of EXP. F***CK. If you guys didn't say it, I wouldn't have known. If that's the case, it won't be long before Tinta becomes a place for us Eastern players to kill monsters for leisure. Of course, you didn't see how Yi Yu of Gojoseon dealt with the soldiers of Tintu. I'm sure that this time, Tintu will definitely be destroyed by Yi Yu of Gojoseon. Hee, go ahead. The more you kill, the better. Going abroad to kill foreign players not only gives a lot of EXP, but it's also not dangerous. I like it. You guys chat. I'll go pick up the trash that Yi Yu of Gojoseon doesn't want. F***CK. You're so cunning. I'm going to pick it up. Just as the players began to search the corpses all over Dragon's subduing city for the items that the soldiers of Tintu had dropped from their deaths, Yichin's 4 armies broke through the border fortresses like a hot knife through butter. Wherever they passed, they were killed and blood flowed like a river. The capital of Tintu, back to Ma City. Report. A messenger rushed into the main hall of the Imperial Palace with a battle report. Before he even entered the door, he fell to the ground with a plop. However, he couldn't care less about the pain in his body. He hurriedly got up and knelt down to the Emperor of Tintu. Your Majesty, things are not good. Dragon's subduing city has been broken, and the 1.8 million troops mobilized from the 18 border fortresses have all been killed. As soon as these words came out, the ministers of Tintu in the main hall were all shocked. How could this be? 1.8 million reinforcements plus the 600,000 defenders of Dragon's subduing city. A total of more than 2 million troops. How could they be completely annihilated? Could it be that the heavens really want my Tintu to die? It's over. An army of more than 2 million has been completely annihilated. What else can we do to stop the attack of the Great Han army? The ministers of Tintu were terrified, and the Emperor of Tintu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, was also not calm. This was easy to see from his face that was as white as paper, his eyes that were wide open, and his body that was constantly trembling. In just a few hours, an army of more than 2 million was completely annihilated and Dragon subduing city was broken. How strong was the Great Han army that attacked Tintu? Very strong. So strong that the Emperor of Tintu could not suppress the fear in his heart. Bei, how is General Bei Liumu? After coming back to his senses, the Emperor of Tintu asked with a trembling voice. General Bei Liumu died on the spot. When a messenger heard this, he quickly bowed and said, Boom! When the Emperor heard this, it was as if he was struck by lightning. His heart immediately fell into despair. General Bei Liumu was the #1 general of Tintu. Now that even Bei Liumu had died, who else could face the enemy? After coming back to his senses, the Emperor of Tintu hurriedly shouted, Quick! Inform the generals of all the border fortresses to guard the city. We must not let the Great Han army take a step forward. Your Majesty, when the messenger heard this, his body involuntarily trembled, and then he said, Because the 18 border fortresses sent 90% of their forces to Dragon subduing city, there was no force to stop the enemy's attack. The enemy directly broke through our 18 border fortresses, and all the soldiers died on the spot. Plop! Hearing the messenger's words, the Emperor of Tintu's body couldn't help but sway and almost fell to the ground. The moment he stabilized his body, his face suddenly turned red, and then with a pu sound, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Your Majesty, how are you? Your Majesty, take care of your dragon body. Quick, call the Imperial Physician, the Imperial Physician. The ministers of Tintu in the main hall were shocked when they saw the Emperor vomiting blood. They hurriedly rushed up to support the Emperor and shouted one after another. Get lost, a bunch of trash. The Emperor of Tintu suddenly pushed away the ministers, and then with a ferocious expression, he cursed loudly. So many soldiers can't even stop the enemy's attack. What use do I have for you?" When the ministers of Tintu heard this, they all lowered their heads in shame and fell into silence. The emperor of Tintu glared fiercely at the crowd and then sternly shouted, "Send the order. All the soldiers in the city, abandon the city, and come to the capital." Yes. When a messenger heard this, he got up and bowed, then turned around and quickly ran out of the main hall. The emperor of Tintu's order was transmitted very quickly. Not long after, the generals stationed in the various cities of Tintu led their troops and quickly gathered in the capital. Time passed by minute, and the number of troops in the capital increased. Soon, it reached 1,000,000 people. In the reincarnation immortal city, Yi Chun, who had released his divine sense and covered the entire Tintu, could not help but raise his eyebrows when he saw Tintu mobilizing its troops and gathering in the capital of Tintu. This would save him a lot of trouble. Thinking of this, Yi Chun's mind moved, and then he shouted to Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, and the other subordinates. "The Tintu army has gathered in the capital. You all will go to the capital of Tintu immediately." "Yes, my lord." After hearing Yi Chun's order, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, and the other generals who had split into 4 groups bowed and saluted loudly to the reincarnation immortal city in the sky. When Yi Chun heard this, he smiled and nodded. Then, with a thought, the space in front of the reincarnation immortal city's army suddenly became distorted. When Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, and the other generals saw this, they immediately led their soldiers toward the distorted space. 10 miles away from the 4 main city gates of the capital of Tintu, the space suddenly became distorted. Then, the 4 armies of the reincarnation immortal city rushed out like a tide and appeared in the wilderness. When all the soldiers of the reincarnation immortal city appeared, Yi Chun, who was in charge of the reincarnation immortal city, narrowed his eyes and shouted, "Attack the city!" "Yes, my lord." When Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Gao Shun, and the other generals heard this, they bowed and saluted to the reincarnation immortal city that had suddenly appeared not far away. In the next second, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Li Yuanba, and the other generals raised their weapons and pointed at the capital of Tintu. "Archers, get ready." Dang, 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 the 241,000,000 soldiers of the reincarnation immortal city drew their bows and aimed at the city walls of the capital of Tintu. Fire! After a chorus of shouts, 41,000,000 arrows instantly rose from outside the 4 major city gates of Tintu and then fell on the city walls of the capital city of Tintu, covering the sky and the sun. On the city walls of the capital of Tintu. "Quick, hide! The Great Han army has released their arrows." "Damn it, how did they get here so quickly?" The Tintu soldiers on top of the city wall were talking amongst themselves. It was a chaotic scene, but they did not forget to look for cover amidst the chaos. They did not want to be killed by the rain of arrows that covered the sky in one wave. Just as the 41,000,000 arrows from the reincarnation immortal city's army were about to hit the city wall, an invisible light barrier suddenly appeared and blocked the 41,000,000 arrows. When the soldiers of Tintu on the city wall saw this, they were all stunned and then suddenly became excited. "Oh my God, these arrows can't shoot in, huh? God, it must be the God protecting us. We don't have to die." "Ha ha, of course we don't have to die. If the arrows can't shoot in, how can the enemy attack us?" The scene on the city walls quickly spread to the ears of the Emperor of Tintu. After confirming the facts again and again, the Emperor of Tintu was suddenly overjoyed. He then led the incredulous officials to the city walls. When the Emperor of Tintu and the officials of Tintu saw the feather arrows piled up on the ground below the city tower, they immediately revealed extremely excited smiles. They could not help but be happy. This was a miracle. At least in their eyes, this was a miracle. As long as there was this shield to protect the entire capital of Tintu, it would be useless no matter how strong the Great Han army was. Chapter 9:10. Just as the emperor and the ministers of Tintu were inexplicably excited by the sudden appearance of the miracle, the soldiers of Tintu, who had recovered from their shock, suddenly clamored one by one. Didn't you want to destroy our Tintu? Come in if you have the ability. Ha ha! Did you see that? The heavens didn't destroy our Tintu. Even if they destroyed our army of millions and besieged the city, so what? It was our gods who stopped them. That's right, as long as our capital of Tintu is not destroyed, sooner or later, we will trample on the Great Han Dynasty and kill all these Great Han Dynasty thieves. Han people, if I were you, I would go back obediently and not waste time here. Sooner or later, we, Tintu, will plant our war flag in the territory of your Great Han Dynasty and kill all your people. We will rob all your treasures. Humans were like this. After obtaining a chance of survival in a desperate situation, they would become inflated. Reincarnation Immortal City. Yi Chun, whose divine sense enveloped the capital of Tintu, heard the ridicule and abuse of the Tintu soldiers and smiled coldly. A mere shield of Providence wants to stop my army? What a joke. The shield of Providence could appear in Tintu because the territory of Tintu was not small. This was the same as when the Great Han Empire was invaded by the Demon Clan. Luoyang was suddenly protected by the Shield of Providence. If the territory of Tintu was too small, the Shield of Providence would not be able to appear. Just like when Japan was destroyed, the capital city was destroyed without even a shadow of the Shield of Providence. Of course, this was not important. What was important was that other people could not do anything about the Shield of Providence, but Yi Chun could. Thinking of this, Yi Chun waved his right hand, and the dark and thick God-slayer instantly appeared in his right hand. In the next second, Yi Chun raised his right hand and threw it into the sky. The God-slayer instantly flew up and then turned into a black light and flashed away. Outside the capital of Tintu, outside the shield formed by luck, a dark light flashed, and then a thick black God-slayer appeared out of thin air and then directly pierced the shield of luck outside the capital of Tintu. With a pop sound, the shield of fortune outside the capital of Tintu was shattered by the God-slayer in the blink of an eye like fragile glass, and then it disappeared without a trace. The emperor of Tintu, the courtiers, and the soldiers all felt as if they had been struck by lightning when they saw this. Their faces were filled with shock and astonishment. They had no choice but to do so. The miracle that could make them burst with confidence just a moment ago was shattered in the blink of an eye. Was this still a goddamn miracle? If it wasn't a miracle, then how could the arrows that blotted out the sky be blocked? Just as the soldiers, courtiers, and the emperor of Tintu on the city wall were in disbelief and shock because the shield of fortune was easily shattered, the God-slayer, which had pierced through the shield of fortune, did not stop but continued to fly. In the blink of an eye, the God-slayer came in front of the emperor of Tintu and pierced straight in. With a pop, the emperor of Tintu was instantly pierced in the heart by the God-slayer. Then, the blood-stained tip of the spear drilled out of the back of the three emperors. At the same time, the God-slayer flashed with a dark light and then disappeared without a trace. At this moment, everyone on the city wall, without exception, all widened their eyes and then fell into a dead silence. The shield of Providence had been shattered, and their emperor had been stabbed to death. All of this had happened too quickly. It was so fast that they couldn't believe that it was real. However, this was the truth. The emperor of Tintu looked down at the bowl-sized bloody hole in his chest and the blood that was spurting wildly from the hole. He opened his mouth, but could not say anything. In the next second, the emperor of Tintu's eyes turned gray and he fell to the ground with a bang. At this moment, the emperor of Tintu's eyes were wide open. Coupled with his expression of unwillingness after his death, it could be described in one word. He died with his eyes wide open. His Majesty is dead. His Majesty is dead. A scream of horror suddenly sounded and broke the silence. The entire city wall instantly fell into chaos. The miracle has been broken and His Majesty is dead. Is God punishing us? No, we are devout believers of God. God will not give up on us. We are righteous. Why? On the city wall, screams continued to sound and then spread into the city. The Tintu soldiers, who had just regained their confidence, suddenly widened their eyes when they heard the news of the miracle being broken and the emperor's death. No, this can't be true. I must have heard wrongly. The miracle can't be broken. If it's true, then what should we do? In the reincarnation Immortal City Army Camp. Long live the Lord! Long live the Lord! Long live the Lord! The earth-shattering cheers sounded over and over again, which stimulated the soldiers in the capital of Tintu. They were frightened and terrified. Just as the soldiers in the capital of Tintu were panicking and the reincarnation Immortal City Army was cheering, the system's prompt suddenly sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi-chun for successfully killing the Emperor of Tintu. Special reward to player Yi-chun. Innate attribute points x 300, purple gold coins x 1, 000, 000. As soon as the system's prompt ended, Yi-chun was first stunned, and then his eyes lit up. Damn, the Emperor of Tintu is much more honest than Emperor Japan. He even contributed innate attribute points to me. Not bad, not bad. Thinking of this, Yi-chun could not help but smile. Then, he sent a message with his divine sense. Attack the city. Yes, my lord. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Huang Sheng, Gao Shun, and the other generals bowed to the reincarnation Immortal City in unison after hearing Yi-chun's order. In the next second, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Huang Sheng, and the other generals raised the weapons in their hands and waved at the capital of Tintu. Archers, get ready. Swoosh. The 41 million soldiers of the reincarnation Immortal City drew their bows and aimed at the city walls of the capital of Tintu. Fire. After the shout, 41 million arrows rose from all directions of the capital of Tintu, covering the sky and the sun. They fell on the city walls and inside the capital of Tintu. Originally, the soldiers of Tintu had fallen into a panic because of the miracle being broken and the death of the emperor in battle. Now, the sudden arrival of the rain of arrows that blotted out the sky directly caused the soldiers in the entire capital of Tintu to fall into complete chaos. Run, run, run. The Great Han Army is shooting again. Don't block my way. Get lost. Get lost. Raise your shields. Raise your shields. On the city walls and inside the city, the soldiers of Tintu fled in horror. Screams, curses, and scoldings were incessant. At this moment, the rain of arrows that covered the sky and the sun came down. Then, the sound of arrows piercing into flesh was heard directly from the city walls and inside the capital of Tintu. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. At this moment, the soldiers and ministers of Tintu on the city walls were all shot to death on the spot without exception. As far as the eye could see, the city walls were full of corpses lying in all directions. Some were even directly killed on the spot. It was not that they did not raise their shields or look for cover, but it was useless, because the bows and arrows in the hands of the reincarnation Immortal City soldiers were spiritual weapons. Equipment of this grade was not something that could be blocked by the mortal world. The death of a large number of soldiers and ministers of Tintu directly caused the capital of Tintu to be even more chaotic. Kill Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Huang Sheng, and other military generals saw this and raised their weapons in unison. After that, they led their troops and rushed to the 4 city gates of Tintu. Soon, the 4 city gates of Tintu were directly smashed under the violent attacks of Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, and other military generals. The next second after the 4 city gates of the capital of Tianzhu were smashed, the army of the reincarnation Immortal City poured into the city from the 4 city gates like a tide and then started their cruel and merciless harvesting mode. Resist, struggle, counterattack, surrender. It was useless. No matter what the soldiers of Tintu did, they could not hold on for even a second under the attack of the reincarnation Immortal City army. Screams, screams, pleas for mercy. and cries soon rang out everywhere in the capital of Tintu. At the same time, the merciless sound of the iron hooves of the reincarnation Immortal City army and the sound of weapons cutting the enemy's body rang out. An hour later, the millions of soldiers in the capital of Tintu were all killed by the army of the reincarnation Immortal City without exception. Chapter 9:11. As far as the eye could see, the capital of Tintu was filled with corpses and scarlet blood everywhere. Coupled with the suffocating stench of blood, the entire city was a city of death. At this point, Tintu was completely destroyed. At this moment, a world announcement suddenly sounded. Ding! The Great Han Empire's general of agile cavalry, Yi Chun, has breached the capital of Tintu and destroyed Tintu. The world announcement was repeated 3 times in a row, instantly causing the entire world channel to explode. F***CK. Yi Yu of Gojoseon is simply too heaven-defying. He actually destroyed Tintu so quickly. It's really admirable. How long has it been? Tintu has already been destroyed by Yi Yu of Gojoseon. Yi Yu of Gojoseon is really too powerful. If Yi Yu of Gojoseon wants to recruit soldiers, I'll be the first to apply. My bet was right, right? Yi Yu of Gojoseon destroyed Tintu in less than half a day. Ha ha! Yi Yu of Gojoseon, are you still recruiting? I want to enlist. I want to conquer the world with you. I want to snatch the heavens, the earth, and the beauties. Get lost. Yi Yu of Gojoseon's weakest soldier can take on 10 of you alone. Do you think he would still want a piece of trash like you? F***CK. Who are you calling a piece of trash? If it weren't for Yi Yu of Gojoseon destroying Japan and Tintu one after another today, I would have beaten you to death. While the world channel was abuzz with discussions, the Eastern players who rushed into Tintu's capital were all stunned by the tragic scene that filled the streets. F***CK. Aren't the Tintu soldiers dying too quickly? In such a short time, not only was the city breached, but they were also not completely wiped out. Nonsense! How can these Tintu soldiers compare to Yi Yu of Gojoseon soldiers? As long as Yi Yu of Gojoseon wants to, even if he comes alone, he can easily destroy Tintu. Man, I think so too. Yi Yu of Gojoseon is a godlike existence. If he wanted to destroy Tintu, it would be a piece of cake. I just feel that it's too fast. Every time I come to pick up the equipment dropped by the Tintu soldiers, I feel a little embarrassed. I didn't help at all. You're underestimating Yi Yu of Gojoseon. Although these pieces of equipment are treasures to us, they're nothing but trash to Yi Yu of Gojoseon. Can't you see? Yi Yu of Gojoseon soldiers didn't even look at the items on the ground. Hey, why didn't you wait for us to pick up the equipment? You're so bad. Just as the players began to search the corpses for equipment, Yi Chun, who was overseeing the reincarnation Immortal City, moved his mind. In an instant, dozens of spatial distortions appeared in the capital of Tintu. In the next second, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Huang Sheng, and the other generals quickly led their subordinates and returned to the reincarnation Immortal City. At that moment, the system notification suddenly rang. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chun for obtaining 40% of Tintu's luck. As soon as the system notification ended, Yi Chun could not help but smirk. 40% of luck? Not bad. Wait a minute. Where's the remaining 30%? When Yi Chun defeated the War Elephant Legion, he had obtained 30% of Tintu's luck. Now that he had obtained 40%, he had a total of 70% of luck. It was obvious that 30% of luck was missing. So how could Yi Chun not be confused? Where's the last 30% of luck? Could it be that there were people like Xiufu, just like Zhixian? Every country had myths and legends. Although Tintu's history was not as long as the East's, it was close to 1,000 years. It was hard to guarantee that there would not be people like Zhixian. Thinking of this, Yi Chun released his divine consciousness and instantly scanned the entire Tintu. 3 seconds later, Yi Chun's eyes widened. Sure enough, there were people like Zhixian in Tintu too. Thinking of this, Yi Chun moved his mind. The space in front of the reincarnation Immortal Island suddenly distorted. Then, The reincarnation immortal island flew straight in and disappeared in an instant. Tintu, Tualuo Mountain. The space suddenly distorted, and then the reincarnation immortal island flew out and appeared here. In the next second, Yi-chan directly rose into the air and flew into the sky. Glancing at the foot of Tualuo Mountain, Yi-chan said calmly, "Come out." Unexpectedly, even this can't hide from your divine consciousness. A sinister voice suddenly came from the depths of the foot of the mountain. Then a man with a strange appearance and even a little deformed flew out of the foot of the mountain and stood in the air. The man had 3 eyes and 4 hands, holding a 3-pronged fork, a conch, a pitcher, and so on. He was wearing animal skin clothes and was covered with strange dust. There was a crescent moon on his head as a decoration. The hair on the top of his head was coiled into the shape of a bull's horn with the symbol of the Ganges River. Glancing at the man who suddenly appeared, Yi-chan asked, "Are you Shiva? Are you Shiva?" Shiva was in existence in Tintu's myths and legends. He was a destroyer, with a dual personality of living organs and destruction, creation and destruction. The most important thing was that his appearance was strange and deformed, which was recorded in many documents. Many believers of Tintu worshipped him as the highest god, and the more believers there were, the more luck Shiva would obtain. It was also for this reason that Shiva held 30% of Tintu's luck in his hands. That's right. Hearing Yi-chan's words, Shiva opened his mouth slightly and a hoarse voice came out of his mouth. "I didn't expect you, a subject of the great Han, to recognize me." After a slight pause, Shiva added, "I have to admit that you are very strong." "If this is a compliment, then I accept it," Yi-chan said with a smile when he heard this. "Humph!" Shiva coldly snorted. He looked at Yi-chan with a gloomy gaze and then coldly shouted. He coldly said, "If you leave now, I can let you go." "It's okay. You don't have to let me go." Yi-chan shrugged nonchalantly and said with a smile, "In the past few years, we have crossed the border of the Great Han. For so many years, your Tintu has repeatedly provoked the bottom line of our Great Han dynasty on the border. I think you also know the purpose of my visit this time. To take away all of Tintu's luck so that Tintu can never rise again, right?" Speaking till here, Shiva's 4 eyes shot out 4 beams of killing intent. Then he then shouted, "Do you really think that with your ability, you can take the last 30% of Tintu's luck from me?" "I think so." When Yi-chan heard this, he could not help but raise his eyebrows and said with a serious expression, "There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you want to take it." Shiva shouted angrily. He waved his hand, and the 3-pronged fork suddenly enlarged 100 times. He stabbed it at Yi-chan. When he saw this, Yi-chan smiled coldly. Then he waved his right hand, and the Godslayer appeared instantly. In the next second, Yi-chan smashed the Godslayer in his right hand towards Shiva's 3-pronged fork without hesitation. Clang! A loud sound was heard. The 3-pronged fork and the Godslayer collided. After a large amount of sparks, a crack was heard. Then the 3-pronged fork broke at the waist and fell to the ground with a clang. Chapter 9:12. Shiva, who had wanted to kill Yi-chan with 1 strike, but had had his trident destroyed, was stunned when he saw this. Then he shouted in shock. He shouted, "How is this possible?" The trident had always been Shiva's divine weapon. It was very powerful. From his point of view, Yi-chan's black spear would not be able to withstand his trident. But in the end, when his 3-pronged trident clashed with Yi-chan's god-slaying spear, it actually broke with a cracking sound. And it broke so cleanly. This result was far beyond Shiva's expectations. How could he remain calm? When Yi-chan heard Shiva's incredulous words, he curled his lips in disdain and said, "Nothing is impossible." When Shiva heard this, he came back to his senses. He looked at Yi-chan fiercely and roared, "Today, you will die without a doubt." Shiva's beloved divine weapon, the trident, had been destroyed by Yi-chan. This shocked Shiva, but besides the shock, he was also filled with anger and greed. He wanted to kill Yi Chun because only by killing Yi Chun could he vent his anger. Of course, most importantly, only by killing Yi Chun could he take the God-Slayer from Yi Chun's hands. After Shiva said this, he waved the water jar in his hand. Then, a torrential column of water shot out from the water jar and headed straight for Yi Chun. When Yi Chun saw this, he smiled coldly. He raised his left hand and pointed at the rapidly approaching column of water. With a buzzing sound, the rapidly approaching column of water, which contained a large amount of energy, suddenly trembled and stopped in midair. With a splash, the column of water that had stopped in midair suddenly turned into water droplets and fell to the ground. Yi Chun had the water spirit pearl. Although he had only just refined it, his ability to control water was real. As for Shiva's water jar, no matter how powerful it was only a divine weapon. Its attack could deal with normal beings, but against Yi Chun, it was no different from throwing an egg at a rock. After all, the water spirit pearl was a connate spirit treasure. Chu Chu was just a divine weapon. How could it do anything to a connate spirit treasure? Seeing Yi Chun easily block the water jar's attack, Shiva's pupils shrank. At this moment, Yi Chun shouted coldly, "My turn." After Yi Chun said this, a violent, murderous aura shot into the sky. Then he charged at Shiva. At the same time, Yi Chun's God-Slayer stabbed at Shiva's head without hesitation. When Shiva saw this, his pupils shrank. At this moment, Shiva felt a strong sense of death. I have to dodge, or I will die. Thinking of this, Shiva quickly clasped his hands together. Then, Shiva disappeared from the spot. After missing, Yi Chun narrowed his eyes. He looked at Shiva, who had suddenly appeared 100 feet away, and said, "You have some skills. Not bad." When Shiva heard Yi Chun's words, his face darkened, and he shouted, "Cut the crap. If that's all you have, I'm afraid you will die here today." Shiva already knew whether Yi Chun was strong or not. However, Shiva had always been a high and mighty god. He was used to being worshipped. How could he admit defeat? Otherwise, he would not have said this. After Shiva spoke, he flipped his right hand, and a jade talisman appeared. He threw it at Yi Chun. Boom! The jade talisman suddenly exploded in midair and turned into flames. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a ghostly hand made of flames. Yi Chun glanced at the rapidly approaching flaming ghost hand and curled his lips in disdain, after which he raised his left hand and casually slapped. Boom! The ghostly hand, which was powerful enough to frighten players, was destroyed by Yi Chun's left hand. It disappeared without a trace. Yi Chun had the pre-creation spiritual treasure, the Fire Spirit Pearl. Although his ability to control fire was unparalleled, he was invincible in the novice zone of the Three Kingdoms. Even if Shiva was a special existence in the novice zone, he could not use any fire talisman to hurt Yi Chun. Seeing Yi Chun easily destroy the ghostly hand, Shiva's eyes narrowed. He raised his head and shouted, "Dragon Mountain Saber!" The moment Shiva spoke, a gust of wind blew through the forest. In that instant, the trees rustled. Then a 100-foot-long, 6-foot-wide saber suddenly flew out of the forest. In the blink of an eye, Shiva grabbed it. The blade was sharp, and there was a ferocious ghost with fangs carved on it. The hilt was embedded with 2 gems. Under the sunlight, there was a strange black fog around it. It was breathtaking. This saber was not bad. Seeing the Dragon Mountain saber in Shiva's hand, Yi Chun raised his eyebrows and said, "This saber is mine." After speaking, Yi Chun raised the God-Slayer and flew toward Shiva. Just as Yi Chun was 1 meter away from Shiva, the God-Slayer in his right hand made a woo sound and lashed out. Boom! In that instant, the space around the God-Slayer exploded from the God-Slayer. "If you want my Dragon Mountain saber, let's see if you have the ability." Shiva's eyes flashed with malice. Then, he swung the saber at the God-Slayer. He was not afraid that the saber would shatter. Bang! The Dragon Mountain saber and the God-Slayer clashed. Sparks flew, and a strong shock wave spread out from the center. There were explosions in the forest. It is indeed a good saber. Although this attack did not hurt Shiva, it confirmed Yi Chun's judgment. If there was nothing special about a divine weapon that could clash with a Godslayer and not shatter, then it would be strange. Of course, this was because the Godslayer's shattering ability had not been activated. Otherwise, no matter how special the Dragon Mountain Saber was, it would have been shattered by the Godslayer. However, this was not important. What was important was that the Dragon Mountain Saber had clashed with the Godslayer, but the result was not broken. Thinking of this, Yi Chun raised the Godslayer in his right hand and smashed it at Shiva. "Get down!" Shiva saw this and quickly raised his saber to block. Dang! There was a loud sound. In that instant, a huge force appeared from where the two weapons had clashed and spread to Shiva's body. Whoosh! Shiva did not even have time to react. He was smashed to the ground by the sudden force. After a boom, Shiva's legs dug deep into the ground. His hands that were holding the saber were not only shaking, but blood also flowed out. Shiva looked at Yi Chun, who was still calm in the sky. He gritted his teeth, moved his lips, and chanted a spell. In the next second, Shiva's eyes widened as he yelled, "What are you doing? Evil ghost, come out!" After Shiva said that, the blade of the Dragon Mountain knife started to vibrate. In that instant, there was a ghostly wail. Then, the evil ghost on the Dragon Mountain saber suddenly came to life. It opened its bloody mouth and charged at Yi Chun. F***CK. You can do that? Yi Chun thought to himself in shock. He raised his left hand and grabbed the ghost that was charging at him. Screech! A sharp scream came from the evil ghost's mouth. "Be quiet, or die." When Yi Chun heard the screech, he frowned. He looked at the evil ghost in his hand and shouted. As soon as Yi Chun finished speaking, the eyes of the ferocious ghost in Yi Chun's grasp shrank. Then, it immediately bowed to Yi Chun in an extremely flattering manner. When Yi Chun saw this, he raised his eyebrows and flew towards Shiva. This time, Yi Chun's speed was more than 10 times faster than before. Bang! Yi Chun kicked Shiva in the chest. Kacha, kacha, kacha! The sound of bones breaking could be heard. Shiva coughed out a large mouthful of blood. Shiva, who was kicked by Yi Chun, narrowed his eyes and roared, You were playing with me." He did not expect that he, who had been able to dodge Yi Chun's attack, would suddenly be unable to dodge. He did not even have the chance to use spells to escape. "So what if I was playing with you?" Yi Chun curled his lips in disdain. Then, he stabbed with the Godslayer in his right hand. The God-slaying spear pierced through Shiva's heart. Poochie! Boom! Shiva's body exploded. Pieces of flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Clang! The Dragon Mountain sword fell to the ground and made a metallic sound. When he saw this, Yi Chun looked at the evil ghost in his left hand and shouted, "Go in! Get in!" After Yi Chun said that, he loosened his left hand and the evil ghost regained its freedom. However, the evil ghost did not escape. Instead, it bowed to Yi Chun before flying into the Dragon Mountain sword and disappearing. The Dragon Mountain sword was a special divine artifact. The key was the evil ghost sealed within. To be more precise, it was a special god artifact that could be continuously strengthened and strengthened. If Yi Chun had not noticed this, he would have killed the evil ghost when it charged over. Yi Chun would have killed it. As for why Yi Chun had left the evil ghost behind, he wanted to obtain the Dragon Mountain sword and reward it to his subordinates in Netherrealm, Lucifer, or someone else. It did not matter who it was. What was important was that this thing became stronger the more it was killed. It was very useful. Yi Chun glanced at the Dragon Mountain saber that was lying quietly on the ground. He reached out with his left hand and grabbed the Dragon Mountain saber in an instant. Then, he threw it into the small world. Chapter 9:13. Just as Yi Chun put the Dragon Mountain saber into his small world, the system's notification suddenly sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chun for obtaining 30% of Tintu's Providence. As soon as the system's notification ended, Yi Chun's Providence instantly skyrocketed. Yi Chun, who noticed this, couldn't help but smirk. Sure enough, a country with a large territory had a stronger Providence. Next, it was time to go to the Polar Bear Empire. Thinking of this, Yi Chun used his mind and the space in front of him instantly distorted. After glancing at the distorted space, Yichen stepped into it and disappeared. Reincarnation Immortal City, City Lord's Mansion. After Yi Chun returned, he used his mind and released his divine sense. However, just as Yi Chun was about to teleport the Reincarnation Immortal City to the Polar Bear Empire, the system's notification suddenly sounded. Ding! The Southern Nation wants to submit to you. Do you accept? As soon as the system's notification ended, Yi Chun was stunned. Damn, there was such a thing? In Yi Chun's previous life, there had never been a case of a country submitting to someone during a world war. Basically, a world war was a free-for-all. Otherwise, Yi Chun wouldn't have been stunned by the system's notification. As for why the Southern Nation, which was famous for its arrogance, and shamelessness, would take the initiative to surrender, it wasn't complicated or difficult to understand. As for the reason, it was very simple. The news of Tintu and Japan's destruction would be broadcasted in other countries besides the Eastern gaming area. To be more precise, the Southern Nation would receive a world announcement saying, the Great Han Empire's General of Agile Cavalry, Yi Chun, has destroyed Japan and Tintu. If these two world announcements were made after Yi Chun's several months of battle, the Southern Nation wouldn't have taken the initiative to surrender. However, the truth was that Yi Chun had destroyed Japan and Tintu in less than half a day. This result undoubtedly told the Southern Nation one thing. The Great Han Empire's General of Agile Cavalry, Yi Chun, was very powerful and brutal. He had the power to crush everything. Otherwise, Japan and Tintu wouldn't have been destroyed so quickly. It was also for this reason that the Southern Nation didn't dare to continue playing the game of being a powerful country. They directly chose to submit to Yi Chun. They did not want to be destroyed, nor did they want to follow in the footsteps of Japan and Tintu. Therefore, they had to submit unconditionally. After Yi Chun recovered his wits, his lips twitched in disdain. Submit? You're overthinking it. If I accept it, although I'll obtain the providence of the Southern Empire, the players and natives of the Southern Empire will become my subjects. When the time comes, the entire country will ascend. Even if I don't take them with me, they will also ascend to the primeval age. I'm not that stupid. Thinking of this, Yi Chun smiled coldly. Then, with a thought, the space in front of the Reincarnation Fairy Island suddenly distorted. In the next second, the Reincarnation Fairy Island flew straight into the distorted space and disappeared without a trace. Yi Chun wanted to destroy the Southern Nation, but Yi Chun wanted to destroy the Polar Bear Empire first. After all, the Polar Bear Empire had a large territory and a lot of fate. Moreover, it bordered the Great Han Empire. Yi Chun didn't want the Polar Bear Empire to send troops all the way to the Great Han Empire and then burn, kill, and loot. This was not Yi Chun's wild guess or judgment. It was based on facts. To be precise, in Yi Chun's previous life, more than 90% of the countries outside the Great Han Empire went to the Great Han Empire to take advantage of it. Even those black-skinned people went to the Great Han Empire to take advantage of it. Among them, the first to invade the East were Japan, Tintu, the Polar Bear Empire, and the Southern Nation. Yi Chun destroyed Japan first because of the hatred in his bones. Even if there was no such thing as fate of heaven and earth, Yi Chun would destroy Japan first. After that, Yi Chun destroyed Tintu because Tintu's War Elephant Legion was really powerful. Now, Yi Chun chose the Polar Bear Empire because the Polar Bear Empire had a huge cavalry legion. If they were left alone, the Polar Bear Empire was likely to invade and sweep nearly 1/3 of the Great Han Empire's territory, just like in his previous life. In this way, it was impossible for the fate of heaven and earth of the Great Han Empire not to be taken away. Yi Chun didn't want to see this happen. At the border between the Polar Bear Empire and the Great Han Empire, shouts, curses, the clashing of weapons, and a neighing of war horses echoed throughout the battlefield. Looking around, a large number of Eastern players were running toward the Great Han Empire's territory. Behind them were countless Polar Bear Empire's cavalry. Every time the Eastern players were caught, they were either sent flying by the war horses, trampled by the war horses, or decapitated by the war horses. Just as the cavalry of the Polar Bear Empire was slaughtering the eastern players, the space above them suddenly distorted. Then, an island that covered the sky appeared out of nowhere. Just as the eastern players and the Polar Bear Empire's players looked up because of the sudden appearance of a black shadow, a world announcement suddenly rang out. Ding! The general of the Great Han Empire's cavalry has arrived at the border between the Polar Bear Empire and the Great Han Empire. The world announcement rang out 3 times in a row, and it instantly blew up the entire world channel. Damn, Yu of Gojosian's marching speed is too fast. Tanju was just destroyed, and they arrived at the Polar Bear Empire in the blink of an eye. What's wrong with being fast? Hee. The faster Yu of Gojosian kills, the more places we can easily kill monsters and level up. Hee. We can even pick up equipment. Although Yu of Gojosian doesn't care about these equipment, their grades are not low. I only picked up an Emperor-level cultivation technique. Emperor-level cultivation technique? Stop showing off. I picked up 2 sacred-level cultivation techniques. F***CK. Your luck is really good. The general of the cavalry, Yi Chun, is here. It's the end of these Russians. Mother Kerr. I've been chased like a dog by them. Now, I can finally turn around and kill these Mother Kerrs. Yes, kill them. Let's see what they can do. Honorable General of the Cavalry, the Polar Bear Empire has no intention of offending the Great Han Empire. We're just retaliating. Please don't misunderstand. Yes, Your Excellency Yi Chun. We'll return to the Polar Bear Empire and promise not to invade a single inch of the Great Han Empire's land. We're friendly nations, General of the Cavalry. Please don't misunderstand. The World Channel was in an uproar, and it was constantly flooded with messages. Among the messages, there were Eastern players near the border between the Polar Bear Empire and the Great Han Empire, Eastern players far away in Tanju, and players from the Polar Bear Empire. Yichen glanced at the constantly flooding World Channel and sneered. Then, he looked at the Reincarnation Immortal City's army that was waiting for orders outside the Reincarnation Immortal City. Prepare for battle. Chapter 9:14. As soon as Yichun finished his words, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang He, Gao Shun, and Zhang Liao, who were waiting for Yi Chen's orders outside the Reincarnation Immortal City, bowed and saluted loudly in the direction of the Castellan Mansion. When Yi Chen heard this, the space outside the Reincarnation Immortal City's army suddenly started to distort. When Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Huang Su, Gao Shun, and Zhang Liao saw this, they shouted in unison, "Let's go!" After the order was given, the 41 million Reincarnation Immortal City soldiers immediately moved toward the distorted space. At the border of the Polar Bear Empire and the Great Han Empire, the space suddenly distorted, and the Reincarnation Immortal City's army quickly rushed out and appeared here. At the border of the Polar Bear Empire, the Polar Bear Empire's players who had given up on chasing after the Eastern players and returned to the spiritual land of the Polar Bear Empire were shocked when they saw this. They had no choice but to change. After all, Yichen simply did not listen to their so-called explanation and directly sent out his troops. What should we do? Yichen really sent out his troops. Fight with him. I don't believe that the Polar Bear Empire will be easily destroyed by Yi Chun like Tintu and Jupan. Fight my ass. Didn't you see that Yi Chun has an island that can fly in the air and teleport soldiers directly to the battlefield? What does this mean? Yi Chun either has all kinds of items like the Holy Sea, or he has some kind of divine weapon. At the very least, that island is definitely not simple. Damn it. What do you think we should do? I've explained and said all the nice and soft words, but what about Yi Chun? Isn't he still going to send troops? Why don't we surrender? Doesn't the East have a tradition of giving preferential treatment to captives since ancient times? If surrendering is useful, Zhu Pan and Tinta wouldn't have been destroyed. F***CK. What should we do then? We can't beat him, and we can't submit to him either. We can't just stay here and wait for Yi Chen to kill us, right? While the gamers of the Polar Bear Empire were having a heated discussion about Yi Chen's deployment of troops, a burly man suddenly said, "Don't worry. Actually, it's not like we don't have a chance." As soon as the burly man finished speaking, all the players from the Polar Bear Empire were stunned. Then, they all looked at the man in unison. The tall and sturdy man glanced at the puzzled gazes of the surrounding players. "We can join the church. As far as I know, the church has a large number of powerful tools. Moreover, the Pope who controls the Curia is a player just like me." "How do you know all this?" A man dressed as the leader of the Polar Bear Empire's players asked the burly man with a gloomy expression. The tall and sturdy man sighed and said, "Colorado, don't worry. I was born as a citizen of the Polar Bear Empire, and I'll die as a ghost of the Polar Bear Empire. At the same time, I'm also a member of the church. This is my belief, and it won't change for anyone. Can the church help us resist Yi Chun?" The middle-aged man, known as Kalav, took a deep look at the burly man when he heard this, and then asked. When the burly man heard this, he nodded very seriously, then said, "That's right, because the Pope has tools that can destroy the entire world." The tall and sturdy man looked up at the sky and continued, "Colorado, the world has changed. Kalav, the world has changed. If you want to survive in this hellish world, the only way is to join the church and become a follower of the Pope. That is the best choice. Only by following the Pope can we avoid the destruction of the devil Yi Chun. Only the Pope can lead us to the light. Yi Chun is so strong. He destroyed Qinghua and Tintu in less than half a day. Is it because Yi Chun also has powerful tools?" The middle-aged man called Colorado narrowed his eyes and asked. After hearing Kalav's question, the burly man nodded, then said, "That's right. Yes, Kalav, without a powerful item, it would be impossible for Yi Chun to destroy Tintu and Jupan in such a short time. In that case, let's go to the Citadel." The middle-aged man called Colorado said after a moment of silence. As soon as the middle-aged man said that, the surrounding players of the Polar Bear Empire looked at each other and nodded in unison. The tall and sturdy man smiled and said, "No need. We'll just wait here. I've already set the coordinates. The Pope can send the Crusaders over at any time." In the reincarnation Immortal City, Yi Chen's divine sense covered the entire battlefield. He narrowed his eyes when he heard the conversation of the players of the Polar Bear Empire. That old fart, the Pope, had chosen to teleport from Qinghua to the Polar Bear Empire. Just like in his previous life, when the Crusaders appeared, the players of the Eagle Kingdom, France, and other countries would appear as well. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Whether they came or not, no one would be able to escape this time, especially that old fart, the Pope. Upon having this thought, Yi Chen's murderous intent instantly rose. Yi Chen looked at Gua Yi and said, Feng, watch the changes in the situation. Feng Xiao, pay attention to the changes in the battlefield. The enemy this time is somewhat different." "Yes, Lord. My Lord." Gua Yi was taken aback for a moment before he hurriedly bowed and saluted. Previously, when Yi Chun destroyed Qinghua and Tintu, these two countries did not have anyone who knew how to cast spells. Therefore, Gua Yi, Jia, Su, Tianfeng, and the others did not have a chance to attack. But now, the Polar Bear Empire that Yi Chun was going to destroy was a little different. Of course, this did not mean that the Polar Bear Empire was very powerful. It was because the Crusaders who were going to be teleported here had a special profession, magicians. If these people were left alone, although their magicians might not be able to harm the reincarnation Immortal City's army, who were wearing spiritual armor, they could create some obstacles or even restrictions for the reincarnation Immortal City's army. It was for this reason that Yi Chun told Gua Yi this. It was not impossible for Yi Chun to destroy the Crusaders directly. However, if he did so, Yi Chen's army would be like a flower in a greenhouse. It would be fine if it was only for a short period of time. But in the long run, no matter how much Yi Chun nurtured the reincarnation Immortal City's army, they would not be able to become an invincible army. Yi Chun did not want to see such an outcome. Otherwise, Yi Chun would not have told Gua Yi this. Chapter 9:15. After hearing Gui Yi's words, Yi Chen nodded in satisfaction. Then, he flew up and arrived above the battlefield in an instant. The reason Yi Chen came out was naturally to deal with the crusaders that were about to appear. He had brought along powerful tools. If Yi Chen knew that the crusader army had these items and allowed his subordinates to deal with them, it would not be training his subordinates. Instead, it would be torturing them. This was because Yi Chen's subordinates would suffer a large number of casualties. This wasn't some alarmist talk, nor was it an exaggeration. Powerful items had such an ability. Even if it was the Samsara Legion, the strongest force in the reincarnation Immortal City, it would not be an exception. This could be easily seen from the ruling sword, which was used to attack Yi Chen. It was because of this that Yi Chen had to personally arrive at the battlefield and be prepared to take action at any time. Of course, even if Yi Chen took action, it would be to deal with the powerful items. As for killing the enemies, it would be left to his subordinates. At the border between the Polar Bear Empire and the Great Han Empire, the Reincarnation Immortal City Army's base. The soldiers of the Reincarnation Immortal City Army appeared continuously and automatically formed into square formations. On the opposite side, the Polar Bear Empire's base, which was made up of tens of millions of Polar Bear Empire players and natives, had gradually calmed down. Among them, the Polar Bear Empire players were no longer panicking because they knew about the Crusader army and the powerful items. As for the natives of the Polar Bear Empire, they were no longer afraid of the Reincarnation Immortal City because of its sudden appearance and the fact that it did not show any destructive power. Unlike before, where the players were at the front and the natives were at the back, the Polar Bear Empire players were at the back of the Polar Bear Empire Native Army. At the base of the Polar Bear Empire Native Army, a deputy general looked at the Reincarnation Immortal Island floating in the sky, then looked at the commanding general and asked, "General, are we going to fight or retreat? If we're going to fight, it's best to do it now. The Great Han Empire has gathered more than 2 million soldiers. If we wait until the entire Great Han Empire army appears and forms into square formations, we'll lose our chance." Did King Yu of the Great Han Empire really annihilate 2 empires in less than half a day? The general couldn't help but frown when he heard this. Then he opened his mouth to ask. The deputy general nodded and said, "That's what the rumors say. That's what the mutants say. As for the specifics, I'm unable to determine. Mutants should all die. Every single one of them is greedy and cowardly. What they said must have been exaggerated." The Polar Bear Empire's commander turned to look at the Polar Bear Empire's players who were hiding behind the native cavalrymen. Then he said fiercely. The deputy general nodded in agreement and said, "General, I think so as well. If you of Beach of the Great Han Empire and Yi Chen of the Great Han Empire were really that powerful, they would have attacked us the moment they appeared. At least 1/10 of our cavalrymen would have perished. You're right. The Great Han Empire's King Yu must have used that flying island to scare off the people from the other 2 empires. That's how he got away with it." The general from the Polar Bear Empire nodded when he heard this. Then he looked at the Reincarnation Immortal City's army and the soldiers from the Reincarnation Immortal City who were constantly rushing out from the distorted space. Although I do not know how the Great Han King was able to make his subordinates appear out of thin air, with just this and that flying island, it is not enough to scare me. After the general said those words, he pulled out the long blade at his waist and raised it high. In the next second, the commanding general of the native cavalrymen of the Polar Bear Empire swung his long saber at the Reincarnation Immortal City soldiers and shouted, "Charge! Take down that treasure island for the Tsar! Kill!" Deafening battle cries sounded instantly. Then, more than 8 million native cavalrymen of the Polar Bear Empire spurred their war horses and charged toward the Reincarnation Immortal City soldiers. At the Reincarnation Immortal City soldiers' camp, Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun, Huang Sheng, Huang Su, and Zhang Liao stood in front of the army of the Reincarnation Immortal City. They glanced at the indigenous cavalries of the Polar Bear Empire, raised their weapons, and shouted, "Change to bows and arrows." Swoosh! The 41 million soldiers of the reincarnation immortal city put down their long spears and changed to bows and arrows. At the same time, the 41 million soldiers of the reincarnation immortal city drew their bows and aimed at the charging native cavalrymen of the Polar Bear Empire. Inject true qi. As soon as Zhao Yun, Guan Er, Dian Xiong, Zhang San, and Huang Sheng gave the order, the 41 million soldiers of the reincarnation immortal city gripped their bowstrings tightly in their right hands. Then, the plain-looking arrows shone with white light. Release the arrows. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, and Li Yuanba waved their weapons at the native cavalrymen of the Polar Bear Empire and shouted in unison. Clang! 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 The sounds of arrows leaving the bowstrings were densely packed in an instant. Swoosh, 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 41 million arrows shimmering with white light shot up into the sky, followed by densely packed air-piercing sounds. Whoosh, 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 the 41 million arrows shone with white light, covering the sky and the sun. They flew faster and faster, followed by a burst of fierce killing intent at the native cavalrymen of the Polar Bear Empire. Looking at the arrows that covered the sky, the general of the native cavalrymen of the Polar Bear Empire curled his lips in disdain. They're shooting arrows from such a long distance. Even if the arrows are bright, what's the use? Are the subordinates of Prince Hugh of Han full of grass in their heads? General, that's great. If they are too smart, then... The deputy general paused for a moment before his eyes narrowed. The next second, the deputy general shouted in surprise, General, these arrows are strange. General, there's something wrong with this arrow. It's already flown for 2,000 meters, but it still hasn't landed. How can this be? Isn't the maximum attack range of a bow only a few hundred meters? How can their bows shoot so far? Because of the deputy general's warning, the general of the Polar Bear Empire immediately noticed the arrows from the reincarnation immortal city. His expression changed dramatically, and he roared angrily. Hearing this, the deputy general hurriedly shouted at the general. General, give the order. Let the soldiers dodge the arrows. There's something wrong with these arrows. If they hit us, we'll definitely die. Chapter 9:16. As soon as the deputy general finished speaking, the face of the Polar Bear Empire's native cavalry general darkened. He raised his head and roared, Raise your shields! The Polar Bear Army general's roar was very loud, but no matter how loud it was, it couldn't be transmitted to all the native cavalry of the Polar Bear Empire on the battlefield. It couldn't be helped. The number of the Polar Bear indigenous cavalry was as high as 8 million. With such a large number, they occupied a large area. Just this point alone restricted the Polar Bear native cavalry general's intention to make all his soldiers listen to his orders. Considering that the Polar Bear indigenous cavalry army was charging at the moment, it was even more impossible for the Polar Bear indigenous cavalry general to directly transmit his orders to all his soldiers. As for the reason, it was very simple. When the cavalry charged, especially when there was a large number of them, the sound of the horses' hooves stomping on the ground was very loud. It was also because of this that the Polar Bear indigenous cavalry general, who had sensed that something was wrong with the arrows shot by the Reincarnation Immortal City's army, was so angry. As soon as the Polar Bear indigenous cavalry general gave the order, the surrounding Polar Bear indigenous cavalry picked up a round shield from the back of their horses and raised it diagonally above their heads. Outside them, some of the Polar Bear indigenous cavalry also raised their shields, while some of them were still charging at the enemy. At this moment, the arrows that were emitting white light and blotted out the sky instantly descended. Poochie, poochie, poochie! The dense sound of arrows piercing into flesh rang out in an instant. At this moment, more than 1.5 million Polar Bear indigenous cavalry soldiers and their war horses were directly shot through by the arrows that fell from the sky. Nay, the shrill whinnies of the war horses followed closely behind. Then the war horses fell to the ground in droves. As for the polar bear native cavalrymen riding on the war horses, their bodies stiffened as they were flung away. Bang, bang, bang. After a series of falling sounds, the polar bear indigenous cavalry army that was charging at the reincarnation Immortal City's army was directly wiped out. At this moment, a series of explosions rang out. Boom, boom, boom. The arrows that pierced through the polar bear native cavalrymen and their war horses suddenly exploded one after another. Then, pieces of flesh and blood flew all over the sky, as well as a large amount of dust and gravel. In an instant, the battlefield, which was originally very tragic, directly turned into hell. As far as the eye could see, the ground was covered in blood. Broken limbs, shattered internal organs, and large intestines were all over the ground. The terrifying scene of a wave of arrows killing one. 5 million cavalrymen instantly shocked the polar bear native cavalrymen and the polar bear empire players who were watching from afar. How could this be? The arrows of the great Han soldiers. How could they shoot so far and explode? Stop. Stop. I can't use charge. If you continue to charge, all of you will die. The general hasn't given the order. We can't stop. If we stop, we will all be executed. Damn it. If we continue to charge, we will definitely be shot to death. Even if we are not shot to death, we will be killed by the explosion. The polar bear native cavaliers spoke one after another about the fear in their hearts. As for the polar bear players, the confidence that was born from the depths of their hearts because of the Eastern Cross Expedition Army and the Pope turned into doubt and even fear. How could this be? What equipment does Yi Qin's army use? Even the ballistae don't have such a long attack range. How would I know? Damn it. If Yi Qin's soldiers could casually release such an attack, even if the Crusader army came, it would be useless. Before they could even get close to Yi Qin's army, they would be shot into hedgehogs. Damn it, that's what I'm worried about. If they're shot to death before they even get close, even if they have powerful items, what's the use? They will still be slaughtered. What should we do? Should we run? Just as the polar bear players were discussing uneasily, the burly man who claimed that he had already prepared the teleportation coordinates suddenly raised his right hand and shouted, "Brothers, don't worry. Brothers, don't worry. Powerful items can be used for long-range attacks, and the range is very far." Hearing the burly man's words, the polar bear players who were feeling uneasy were taken aback. Then their eyes lit up. Damn it. If that's the case, then there's nothing to worry about. Indeed, as long as there's a chance to attack, there's nothing to worry about. Do you think that Yi Qin was able to destroy Qinghua and Tintu in half a day because of the bows and arrows? Of course, the bows and arrows in their hands are insane. With such a long range and powerful attack power, they're no different from the cannonballs before the meteor shower. Not only that, but they're almost as powerful as the missiles. Damn it, this damn world. If not for the fact that firearms are ineffective, the Polar Bear Empire wouldn't have to suffer such grievances. Nonsense. If missiles could be used, no one would dare to attack the Polar Bear Empire. Just as the Polar Bear players were reinvigorated by the burly man's words and were discussing enthusiastically, the reincarnation Immortal City's army shot the second wave of arrows at the Polar Bear native cavalrymen. Poochie, poochie, poochie. The sound of arrows piercing through flesh was heard again. What was different from before was that this time, the arrows also pierced through the round shields that the soldiers of the polar bear raised over their heads. Bam, bam, bam. The war horses fell to the ground, and the cavalrymen were sent flying. Boom, boom, boom. After the violent explosions, more than 5 million polar bear native cavalrymen who raised their round shields but were still shot to death were blasted into smithereens. Like a purgatory slaughterhouse, the bloody scene appeared on the battlefield again. At a glance, the ground was blood red, and broken limbs were scattered all over the ground. There were also pieces of internal organs and intestines that were smashed into pieces, broken skulls, and eyeballs that were stained with blood and tendons. The polar bear native cavalryman's eyes constricted when he saw the 5 million polar bear native cavalrymen killed by the reincarnation Immortal City's army. At this moment, the deputy general of the polar bear native cavalrymen's army looked at the commanding general with a pale face and said, "General, we must retreat." General, give the order. We have to retreat. We have to retreat to the border city immediately. The archers of the Ghost King are too powerful. If we continue to charge, everyone will be shot to death. Retreat. When the commanding general heard this, he came back to his senses and looked at the deputy general hurriedly. "Quick, pass down the order. Retreat to the border city. Use the city walls to block the great Han army." "Yes, General. General." When the deputy general heard this, he hurriedly responded and ran to pass on the order of the general. At this moment, the third wave of arrows shot into the sky and covered the sky as they shot toward the terrified polar bear native cavalrymen. Chapter 9:17. Damn it! Retreat! The general of the polar bear native cavalry looked at the third wave of arrows. His face immediately paled, and he roared loudly. After roaring, he turned his horse around without hesitation and ran away. The personal guards of the polar bear native cavalry commander hurriedly turned their horses around and followed the polar bear native cavalry commander. They left, but the remaining 5 million polar bear native cavalry commanders didn't react that quickly. When they realized that the commander's flag was leaving the battlefield, the arrow rain had already arrived. In a few breaths' time, more than 5 million polar bear native cavalry commanders were killed on the spot. Their corpses were blown up into pieces. The general fled. "Let's flee too. Retreat! Retreat!" Chaotic and panicked roars rang out one after another. The polar bear native cavalry turned their horses around without any hesitation, then madly spurred them on and galloped into the distance. In the reincarnation Immortal City's army, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Gao Shan, and Zhang Liao raised their weapons and roared. "Charge!" The 41 million soldiers of the reincarnation Immortal City took out their long spears in unison. Then they raised their spears and shouted, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" Their murderous aura surged as they charged. Rumble! Rumble! Thousands of horses galloped and the earth rumbled. 2,410,000 soldiers of the reincarnation Immortal City charged toward the 3 million or so polar bear native cavalrymen with an unstoppable momentum and cold, killing intent. In the sky, Yi Chen's divine sense covered the entire battlefield. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Killing these polar bear native cavalry commanders would allow 50,000 soldiers to advance to saint-level generals. Not bad, not bad, in the polar bear empire where the player's army was. These damn natives, they fled so quickly. What should we do? Should we retreat first? I think it's better to retreat first. We don't know when the Crusaders will arrive. If we continue to wait here, Yi Chen's army will definitely attack us. Although this is a game world, and we won't really die if we die, we'll lose 10 levels if we die. I don't want to lose 10 levels. If I really do, I won't be able to resist the monsters outside the city when I go offline. This damn game. Why do we lose so many levels after dying? If only we didn't lose levels. That way, we wouldn't have to be afraid of Yi Chen. Nonsense. If he doesn't lose levels after dying, how can Yi Chen win? There's still 10-2. Any one of them can drag Yi Chen down. Stop talking nonsense and retreat quickly. If we don't retreat now, we'll all die once we enter the attack range of Yi Chen's army. While the players of the Polar Bear Empire were discussing the reincarnation Immortal City's army's charge, the leader of the Polar Bear Empire's players looked at the burly man and asked, "When will the Crusaders arrive?" "I'm not sure about the exact time, but it shouldn't be too late." The burly man shook his head and replied. The leader of the Polar Bear Empire's players frowned and asked with a gloomy face, "Is the Pope trying to trick us? Is the Pope trying to trick us or even scheme against us?" No. The Pope's ambition is to spread the light of the Lord throughout the world. He won't give up on any people who are willing to believe in our Lord. The burly man shook his head and said without hesitation. The leader of the Polar Bear Empire's players took a deep look at the burly man and said, Nagoev, you're telling the truth. Nagyev, you better be telling the truth. Otherwise, you will be the sinner of the Polar Bear Empire. I swear in the name of God that I'm telling the truth. If the Crusaders don't come, I'm willing to die for my sins. The burly man called Nagoev shouted without hesitation. In the sky, Yi Chen's divine sense enveloped the entire battlefield. He glanced at the Polar Bear Empire's players and curled his lips in disdain. The Crusaders would definitely come, but only after the Polar Bear Empire's players suffered heavy losses. This was the old Pope's strategy. If he could subdue them, he would subdue them. If it was difficult, he would appear as the savior of the world and subdue them. If he couldn't subdue them, he would attack them and subdue them. The Western Vatican was a believer of the God of Light in the Western mythology system. Their purpose was to spread their teachings and develop believers. In order to achieve this goal, the Vatican would often appear as the savior of the world to save the people. Then, the people would accept the Vatican and the God of Light and become believers of the God of Light. At this moment, the Polar Bear Empire's players who didn't want to be ruled by the Vatican would suffer. Then, the Vatican would appear as the savior of the world to save the Polar Bear Empire's players. This would make it easier for the Polar Bear Empire's players to become believers of the God of Light. Others might not be able to see this, but Yi Chun, who had been reborn, could. Thinking up to this point, Yi Chun sneered. He then looked at the Polar Bear Empire's army, a kilometer behind them. That place looked ordinary and mediocre, but that was not the case at all. That was because there were hundreds of stone slabs with complicated carvings hidden underground. When they lit up, the Crusaders would be officially teleported over on the ground where the reincarnation Immortal City's army was. Rumble, rumble. Tens of thousands of horses galloped, and the earth rumbled. The 41 million reincarnation Immortal City soldiers kept charging and charging, and their speed became faster and faster. Soon, they caught up with the fleeing Polar Bear Empire's native cavalry. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, and other generals took the lead and waved their weapons without hesitation. At this moment, dozens of air blades that were 100 meters long appeared out of nowhere and slashed toward the Polar Bear Empire's native cavalry. Slash, slash, slash. After the sound of bodies being cut apart rang out, thousands of Polar Bear native cavalrymen were directly cut in two. Then, their intestines and innards could be seen flowing all over the ground. The war horses were still galloping, but the people on them were cut into two halves. This horrifying scene instantly frightened the surrounding Polar Bear Empire's native cavalry. Then, they urged their war horses to gallop forward with all their might. However, their war horses were obviously not as strong as the war horses of the reincarnation Immortal City's army. In just a few breaths, the Polar Bear Empire's army violently cut through the fleeing Polar Bear Empire's army. At this moment, the sound of spears piercing through bodies could be heard. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. The Polar Bear Empire's native cavalry was stabbed to death by the reincarnation Immortal City's soldiers who caught up with them. Blood spurted out, and the war horses neighed. The brutal and cruel harvesting mode had officially begun. Chapter 9:18. Rumble. Tens of thousands of horses galloped, and the earth rumbled. The army of the reincarnation Immortal City continued to charge forward, thrusting out their spears one after another. Groups of Polar Bear native cavalrymen were killed one after another. Fresh blood started to flow, and the earth was dyed red again. Along with the blood on the ground were the broken corpses of the Polar Bear native cavalrymen and the minced meat of the war horses. The wind blew, and the smell of blood filled the air. The Polar Bear native cavalrymen screamed in fear and despair, and the cries of the war horses became louder and louder. Don't kill me. I surrender. I surrender. Spare me. Spare me. Harumph. The Polar Bear native cavalrymen screamed and yelled crazily. However, what greeted them was the merciless slaughter of the reincarnation Immortal City's army. Yi Qin's order was to exterminate every single one of them. If they encountered a village, they would exterminate a village. If they encountered a town, they would exterminate a town. If they encountered a city, they would exterminate a city. As the soldiers of Reincarnation Immortal City, who were under Yi Qin's command, no one dared to disobey. Rumble, rumble. Tens of thousands of horses galloped and the earth rumbled. The Reincarnation Immortal City's army crazily slaughtered the polar bear native cavalrymen, who were on the verge of collapse. Piles of corpses were lying on the ground, and blood was flowing freely. Cries and screams were constantly heard at the location of the Polar Bear Nation's army. Why aren't they here yet? Didn't they say that they would be here soon? We have to retreat quickly. Otherwise, when Yi Qin's army arrives, none of us will be able to escape. Even without Yi Qin's army, these damned natives are enough to make us suffer heavy casualties. Look, they've all gone crazy. The Polar Bear Nation's players were getting more and more frustrated because the Crusader army hadn't arrived yet. The leader of the Polar Bear Nation's players looked at the Polar Bear native cavalrymen with a gloomy face. Then, he looked at the burly man called Najiev and asked in a deep voice, "Najiev, are the Crusader army coming or not? If they're not coming, we have to retreat now. Otherwise, we'll be crushed to death by these damned natives before Yi Qin's army arrives." The burly Najiev looked at the leader of the players and said seriously, "Kaf, the light of light will not give up. Kalev, the Pope won't give up on the believers of the light god. He said that he would send the Crusaders, so he will definitely send them. What we need to do now is to wait here. If we leave now, Yi Qin's army will definitely trample the teleportation formation I set up. At that time, the Polar Bear Empire will definitely be breached and destroyed." Najiev's player's leader's face, Kalov's face darkened again. At this moment, the burly Najievs. Think about Tin2, which was destroyed. If the Polar Bear Nation is destroyed, we'll be killed by the Eastern players. The rule of the game is that we'll lose 10 levels every time we die. If we die too many times, we won't be able to resist the monsters outside the city in the real world. Then, everyone in the Polar Bear Nation will be killed by the monsters. Do you know what that means? Enough. Kalov was enraged. He looked fiercely at the burly Najiev and shouted, "Who cares about me? What does the life and death of others have to do with me? Let me tell you, if we die in battle, the city we built in the real world will also be destroyed by the monsters outside the city. When that time comes, all of us will die." As soon as leader Kalov finished his words, the surrounding players looked at each other and instantly became noisy. "Leader, let's retreat. That damn Pope is probably playing with us." "That's right, leader. Our survival is the most important thing. If it weren't for the fact that we can't go offline now, I would have gone offline immediately. I definitely wouldn't fight with Yi Qin's army." "That's right. Isn't there an old saying in the East? Where there's life, there's hope. Only if we stay alive can we survive in the real world. If our nation is destroyed, so be it. It's just a game, not the real world." The burly Najiev's face darkened when he heard this, and he quickly shouted, "Retreat. We can't retreat. If we retreat, the Polar Bear Nation will be finished. Prince Yu of Han, Yi Qin, has implemented a policy of extermination. He won't let anyone go. Even if we run, we can't go offline. It's a world war now, so we can only stay in the game world." "Shut up." The leader of the Polar Bear players, Kalov, glared at Najiev and shouted, "Bring the teleportation array with you. Take the tools you used to set up the teleportation circle. We'll leave now and set it up somewhere else. The teleportation array can only be set up once. Once it's set up, it can't be taken out. If it's forcefully taken out, the teleportation array will automatically shatter." The burly Najiev shook his head and said. The leader of the Polar Bear Nation, Kalov's face changed when he heard this, and he roared, "Bastard! Why didn't you say so earlier?" Kalov didn't hesitate to shout at his subordinates, "Retreat! Let's retreat." As soon as Kalov's words fell, the burly Najiev unhesitatingly swung his blade towards Kalov's head. "Pucci!" Kalov's head flew into the air. Fleeing before the battle is betraying the god of light. Traitors will be killed without mercy. The expressions of the surrounding players changed when they heard Nagiev's words. Then, Nagiev roared, "Don't doubt me. I've also set up teleportation arrays in the cities in the real world. Even if we die countless times in the game world, we don't have to worry about the dangers in the real world, because His Holiness the Pope will send troops to protect us." If someone is a devout believer, they'll be allowed to go to the Vatican to listen to the oracle of our Lord and bathe in our Lord's divine light. As soon as the burly Nagiev finished his words, the surrounding polar bear players were all stunned. After a brief moment of shock, they unsheathed their weapons without hesitation and swore an oath that shook the heavens. "We pledge our lives to follow the Pope and forever believe in the great God of light." Nagiev nodded in satisfaction when he heard this. Then he looked at the polar bear native cavalry that was rapidly approaching and shouted, "Kill the war horses. Use the corpses of the war horses to create a city wall and stop them from coming over." The players of the Polar Bear Empire dismounted without hesitation and lined up their war horses in a row. The next second, the sound of swords hacking the war horses could be heard. In the sky, Yi Chen's divine sense enveloped the entire battlefield, and he sneered when he saw this. Did they really think that the Dogsh *T Crusade army was invincible and omnipotent? They were thinking too much. Chapter 919. Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain. He then looked at Guo Yi, Jiasu, Tian Feng, Pang Tong, and Chen Gong, who were waiting in the front yard of the Reincarnation Immortal City. "Activate the formation." "Yes, my lord." Guo Yi, Jiasu, Tian Feng, Pang Tong, and Chen Gong, who were observing the battlefield, immediately bowed to the sky. In the next second, Guo Yi, Jiasu, Tian Feng, Pang Tong, and Chen Gong looked at the huge map of the battlefield in front of them. They then raised their hands and pointed at the sky. "Wind force." After a shout, 5 mysterious forces appeared on the battlefield above the Reincarnation Immortal City's army. With a buzz, the Reincarnation Immortal City's army and their war horses were shrouded in a gust of wind. Then, the speed of the Reincarnation Immortal City's army increased by 3 times. Rumble. 10,000 horses galloped and the earth rumbled. The Reincarnation Immortal City's army increased their speed and entered the polar bear native cavalry in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the sound of bodies being pierced was heard. Poochie, poochie, poochie. Hundreds of thousands of polar bear native cavalry were stabbed to death on the spot. Then, their corpses were sent flying into the air. Rumble, rumble. The army of the Reincarnation Immortal City galloped past them and sent another group of native cavalrymen of the polar bear tribe flying. The native cavalrymen that had been sent flying earlier fell to the ground like raindrops. At the polar bear native cavalry's location, the general of the polar bear native cavalry, who was leading his subordinates to flee frantically, couldn't help but look back when he heard the strange noise behind him. Then, his face suddenly turned deathly pale. How can they be so fast? If the Reincarnation Immortal City's army was moving at the same speed as before, the general of the polar bear native cavalry would still be worried. However, he wouldn't be frightened because he would still have a chance to escape back to the border city. Although he would have to abandon all his men, he would still have a good chance of surviving. However, the Reincarnation Immortal City's army had increased their speed by 3 times. It was impossible for him to outrun them at such a speed. At this moment, the general of the polar bear native cavalry's deputy suddenly shouted, "General, look at those mutants." When the general heard the deputy general's words, his face turned pale. He retracted his gaze from the army of the Reincarnation Immortal City and looked ahead. In the next second, the general's anger exploded. "These bastards! Charge! Kill them all!" The general of the polar bear native cavaliers was terrified by the sudden increase in the speed of the Reincarnation Immortal City's army. Now, the mutant players on his side killed the war horses on their way and used the corpses of the war horses to create a meat wall. How could the commander not know what was going on? It was precisely because he knew that the commander was so angry. As soon as the commanding general finished speaking, another deputy general hastily shouted, "That's right. General, you can't. It's best if we send some men to deal with the Han army behind us. We'll go around these damned Inhumans. Otherwise, I'm afraid we won't be able to return to Border City. Zavolsky, I'll leave the matter of stopping the enemy to you. I'll take good care of your family." When the general heard this, he recovered from his anger and hurriedly looked at a middle-aged man beside him. When a middle-aged man called Zavolsky heard this, his expression changed. However, when he saw the hostile gazes around him, he fell silent. After a few breaths, Zavolsky said in a deep voice, "General, I hope you'll keep your promise. Also, give my family 1,000,000 gold coins." "Okay. I, George Kallisler, swear on the honor of the Kallisler family that when I return to Border City, I'll give Zavolsky's family 1,000,000 gold coins." When the general heard this, he nodded without hesitation. When a middle-aged man called Zavolsky heard this, he gave the general a deep look. Then he turned around and shouted, "General's order! Turn around and face the enemy. Anyone who disobeys will be demoted to slaves." When the middle-aged man finished speaking, the fleeing polar bear cavaliers were stunned. Then they burst into an uproar. "F*CKU. We'll die if we turn around. Damned aristocrats. You want to exchange my life for yours? I'll kill you first. Kill these spoiled bastards. Their lives are important, but our lives aren't." After the commotion, the polar bear cavaliers drew their long swords without hesitation and slashed at the middle-aged man. Poochie! The middle-aged man's head flew up in an instant. Then scarlet blood splattered everywhere. "Damn it! Are you trying to rebel?" When the general who was galloping away saw this, his expression changed drastically. Then he roared with a ferocious look. The general was furious. However, no matter how angry he was, it was useless. The polar bear cavaliers, who were on the verge of collapsing under the attack of the reincarnation Immortal City's army, did not care about the aristocrats or the general. At this moment, there was only one thing on their minds, and that was to escape. They had to escape as fast as they could. As long as they escaped, they still had a chance to live. If they obeyed the order or failed to escape, there would only be one outcome. They would die under the iron hooves of the reincarnation Immortal City's army. "General, run!" When the general's deputy general saw that his subordinates were not obeying the order, his expression changed. Then he hurriedly shouted at the general, "Damn it! Damn it! All of you deserve to die. Why go back? I will demote all of you scum to slaves and kill all of your families." The general glared hatefully at the soldiers who used to be his subordinates before he roared in a stern voice. After he finished speaking, he urged his warhorse to charge forward with all his might. Rumble, rumble, thousands of horses galloped and the earth rumbled. The reincarnation Immortal City's army, whose speed had increased by 3 times, killed the polar bear cavaliers violently and rapidly. Swaths of the polar bear cavaliers were sent flying. Then they were trampled into meat paste by the warhorses. As far as the eye could see, the ground was covered in blood. Corpses were everywhere, and blood was flowing freely. After 10 minutes, the polar bear cavaliers were all killed. The general of the polar bear cavaliers, who was running away frantically, was shot dead by Huang Shang's arrow. At the moment when the general of the polar bear cavaliers died, a rain of arrows suddenly shot out from behind the wall of warhorse corpses. When Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Gao Shun, and the other generals saw this, they all raised their weapons and shouted, "Pierce!" Chapter 920. Kill! 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 Deafening battle cries sounded, and the 41 million soldiers of reincarnation Immortal City leaned forward with their spears raised. Then they followed Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Gao Shun, and the other generals and charged toward the war horse wall created by the players of the Polar Bear Empire. At this moment, An unstoppable aura erupted from the army of Reincarnation Immortal City and swept toward the players of the Polar Bear Empire. At this moment, the arrows shot by the players of the Polar Bear Empire fell from the sky. Tink, tink, tink. The dense sounds of arrows colliding with each other sounded. The arrows that filled the sky were all deflected by the armor of the Reincarnation Immortal City soldiers. As for the few arrows that could hit the faces of the Reincarnation Immortal City soldiers, they were easily deflected by the Reincarnation Immortal City soldiers. Rumble, rumble, tens of thousands of war horses galloped, and the earth rumbled. The army of Reincarnation Immortal City was still charging, and the soldiers of Reincarnation Immortal City controlled their speed and increased their speed even more. In the next second, Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, Gan Ning, and the other generals all waved their right hands. Magic treasure, level swords, instantly appeared in their hands. At the same time, they used the green lotus sword technique without hesitation. At this moment, the green lotus appeared out of thin air and flew rapidly toward the wall of flesh made of horse corpses. It arrived in the blink of an eye. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of explosions, the green sword chi that filled the sky instantly exploded. Chilla, chilla, chilla. The sound of sword energies cutting the war horse corpses sounded, and then the war horse wall created by the players of the Polar Bear Empire was destroyed. Where the players of the Polar Bear Empire are, the players of the Polar Bear Empire widened their eyes in shock when they saw the wall of horse corpses being emptied. Impossible. Where are the realms of these great Han generals? They are sword immortals from the East. They must be. I've heard of the legends from the East. What should we do, now that the gap has been opened? Not to mention how powerful the great Han dynasty's generals are. Just those soldiers alone are not something we can handle. While the players of the Polar Bear Empire were frightened by the domineering attacks of Zhao Yunzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, and Huang Sheng, the burly Negev raised his long saber and roared, "Let's go. Don't be afraid. We still have a chance. Keep killing the war horses. Even if those great Han generals are strong, they can't keep using those powerful moves. As long as we hold on until the Pope's Crusade army arrives, we can turn defeat into victory. Even if we lose levels, we can still charge into the east under the lead of the Crusaders and kill all the heretics. After that, we will quickly recover our strength." As soon as Negev finished speaking, the Polar Bear players, who were originally trembling with fear, instantly regained some of their courage. Then, one by one, they unsheathed the long swords at their waists. That's right. This is a game. Even if we die, we won't really die. Even if we lose levels, we can still continue to kill monsters and fight our way back. The cultists of the East. That's right. Just like the Eastern players who kept killing the Eastern players at the Folding River and the Indian players at the Folding River, we can kill the Eastern players like they are monsters. And we have a lot of experience. Just as the Polar Bear players quickly raised their fighting spirit and killed the war horses without hesitation in order to create obstacles for the Reincarnation Immortal City's army, Yi Chen's eyes turned cold as his divine sense enveloped the entire battlefield. A bunch of ants trying to overturn the heavens. At this thought, Yi Chen looked directly at the Samsara Legion at the rear of the Reincarnation Immortal City's army. Change your mounts. At the rear of the Reincarnation Immortal City's army, the 510,000 Samsara Legion soldiers who were riding on war horses opened their eyes abruptly. Then, they looked at the sky and bowed loudly. "Yes, my lord." At this moment, a thick and suffocating murderous aura emanated from the Samsara Legion soldiers. Then, with a boom, they soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, a blood-red cloud formed in the sky. This was a phenomenon that would only appear when an army with a strong murderous aura and had killed countless people. The Samsara Legion was the #1 legion that had killed the most people in the Reincarnation Immortal City, had the strongest murderous aura, and had the strongest combat strength. This was because they had followed their lord, Yi Chen, and killed tens of millions of players and hundreds of millions of demons. Every one of them was covered in blood. Even when they walked on a daily basis, they could still smell the blood that couldn't be washed away. It could be said that the soldiers of the Samsara Legion were Asuras who had walked out of hell with mountains of corpses and seas of bones. Now that Yi Chun was angry, the soldiers of the Samsara Legion, who were loyal to Yi Chun and were also Yi Chun's personal guards, exploded. Boom, boom, boom. Dull and heavy landing sounds could be heard one after another. In the next second, all the soldiers of the Samsara Legion jumped up from their war horses and rode on the huge wild rhinos that suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Moo! An earth-shattering roar instantly resounded throughout the battlefield and then soared into the sky. The soldiers of the Samsara Legion each had a wild rhino as a mount, and they usually kept them in the pet slot. This time, the Samsara Legion, as the #1 legion of the Reincarnation Immortal City, did not use the wild rhinos in order to let the other soldiers gain as much experience as possible. Now that they had received orders from their lord, Yi Chun, they did not hesitate to use the wild rhinos. At the location of the Polar Bear Army, the Polar Bear Army players, who were crazily killing war horses and creating obstacles, felt a chill from death at the same time. That chill made their souls tremble and their bodies turn cold. Sensing this, the Polar Bear Army players couldn't help but look at the Reincarnation Immortal City's army. Then, they saw the thick and bloody blood-red cloud in the sky. What is that, damn it? Why do I feel like I'm going to die when I look at the blood-red cloud? In the sky, Yi Chun, whose divine sense covered the entire battlefield, saw that the soldiers of the Samsara Legion had all changed into their mounts. He glanced coldly at the Polar Bear Army players and then waved his right hand. With a buzzing sound, the space where the Samsara Legion was heading towards started to distort. Seeing this, the captains of the Samsara Legion raised the spears in their hands and roared, "Charge! Kill! Kill! Kill!" Deafening shouts sounded instantly, and the blood-red cloud in the sky started to surge. In the next second, the 510,000 Samsara Legion soldiers who had changed into wild rhinos charged into the distorted space and then disappeared. Chapter 9:21. The space in front of the Reincarnation Immortal City's army suddenly distorted. In the next second, 510,000 Samsara Legion guards riding on wild rhinoceroses charged out. Rumble! Tens of thousands of rhinoceroses galloped, and the earth's crust trembled. Instantly, smoke and dust filled the sky. At the same time, a bloody and violent, murderous aura exploded with the appearance of the Samsara Legion. Then, the Samsara Legion charged toward the Polar Bear players. In that instant, all the Polar Bear players who discovered the Samsara Legion felt a chill run down their spines. Such a strong, murderous aura. Damn it, my legs are starting to tremble. Look at the mounts they are riding. What kind of spiritual creatures are those? Rhinoceroses? No, those aren't rhinoceroses. Rhinoceroses aren't that big. Damn it, they are coming. While the Polar Bear players were shocked by the sudden appearance of the Samsara Legion, the burly Najev's pupils constricted. Then, without hesitation, he raised the long saber in his hand and shouted, "Don't be afraid. This is a game world. You won't really die if you die. At most, you will drop a level. Charge! Buy time for His Highness, the Pope's Crusade Army. Then we can counterattack. Not only will we regain our level, but we will also improve a lot." As soon as Najev finished speaking, the Polar Bear players who were panicking because of the sudden appearance of the Samsara Legion and the suffocating murderous aura were shocked. Yes, don't be afraid. Even if you die, you won't really die. Let's go. Stop them. For the glory of the Polar Bear Empire and the glory of the God of Light, charge. The Polar Bear players shouted one after another and charged toward the Samsara Legion. Rumble! Tens of thousands of rhinoceroses galloped, and the earth's crust trembled. The 510,000 Samsara Legion guards charged forward again and again. Then, the Samsara Legion quickly divided into 10 rows and crashed into the wall of corpses of war horses that still existed. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of intense collisions, The 10,000-meter-long wall of corpses instantly crumbled. Then, the corpses of the warhorses flew into the air and fell into the distance. Rumble! 10,000 bulls galloped and the earth rumbled. The Samsara Legion did not stop after knocking through the wall of corpses. They continued to charge forward in a frenzy. After a few breaths, the Samsara Legion guards and the polar bear players came into contact. In that instant, the guards of the Samsara Legion mercilessly raised their weapons and stabbed. Poochie, poochie, poochie! The dense sound of long weapons piercing through bodies was instantly heard. Then, the guards of the Samsara Legion carried the bodies of the polar bear players with them and continued to charge forward. In the next second, dense sounds of collisions and the sound of flesh being trampled on followed. Pong, pong, pong. The moment the voice sounded, the polar bear players were sent flying into the air by the barbaric rhinoceroses, which had huge bodies and shocking brute strength. Among them, some had their armor shattered, and they vomited blood and died in the air. Some had their bodies shattered in midair and died without a complete corpse. This was what happened to the polar bear empire players. On the ground, the corpses of the warhorses used by the polar bear players to create obstacles were trampled into meat paste by the thick and heavy hooves of the barbaric rhinoceroses. Rumble! The Samsara Legion was still charging forward. They were not slowed down by the polar bear players and the restrictions of the corpses of the warhorses on the ground. Rumble! The players of the polar bear empire were constantly stabbed to death and sent flying. The warhorses on the ground were constantly trampled into meat paste. A path made of meat paste and flowing blood quickly appeared on the battlefield. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the Samsara Legion's guards cut the polar bear army in half. Mother of asterisk cur, cutting melons and vegetables, there's no way to fight at all. Mother of asterisk cur, Prince you of Han, how did you train such a group of monsters? Where did you find such ferocious mounts? The warhorses are like toys in front of their mounts. What toys? This is the difference between an ant and an elephant. I originally thought that we could at least hold them back for a while, but in the end, that group of crazy rhinoceroses went on a rampage. They didn't care about the corpses of the warhorses at all. With a stomp of their hooves, the corpses of the warhorses were crushed into pieces. Why don't we retreat first? Retreat my ass. At this point, there's no point in retreating. We can't outrun Yi Qin's armed forces. Then what do? We can't win at all. We have to fight even if we can't win. Mother of asterisk cur, we can't just wait to die. Where's Negev? He died long ago. He was trampled to death by those crazy rhinoceroses. Mother of asterisk cur, we shouldn't have listened to Negev. Who knows if the Pope will send the Eastern Cross Expedition Army over? Don't say any more. We can only trust that Negev now. Hurry up and face the enemy. Yi Qin's cavalry is coming again. Just as the polar bear players were shocked by the violent and barbaric attacks of the Samsara Legion, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, and the other generals led their troops over and started harvesting the polar bear players. At first, the players of the polar bear army tried to put up a fight. However, when they realized that it was futile, they gave up and stood on the spot, waiting for the army of the reincarnation Immortal City to kill them. They had no choice. They couldn't win, and they couldn't escape. They couldn't delay the reincarnation Immortal City's army for even a second. They might as well wait for their deaths. Not only would this save them a lot of trouble, but it would also prevent them from having to bear the agitation of the bloody battlefield. After all, this was a game. Even if they died, they wouldn't really die. At most, they would drop 10 levels. This was the mentality of the polar bear players. Unfortunately, they didn't know that if the polar bear empire was destroyed, what awaited them would be a tragic ending. More accurately, they would be completely eliminated by the cruel reality of the world. The reason was very simple. After the polar bear empire was destroyed, the strength of the polar bear empire's players would be greatly reduced. Moreover, they would be continuously killed by the Eastern players. A single death was enough to affect the real world. If they died too many times, their safety in the real world would be greatly reduced, and they would be easily killed by the demonic creatures outside the city. Their corpses would be completely obliterated. It could be said that the destruction of Yi Qin's empire in the game was equivalent to the destruction of the empire in the real world. Basically, as long as the players of the empire were destroyed by Yi Qin, the outcome would be the same in the real world. That was death. It was very bloody, very cruel, and very inhumane. Did Yi Qin know about this outcome? Of course he knew. However, Yi Qin didn't care about this at all, because if there was no Yi Qin in the east, then the eastern players would be attacked by the Alliance army again, just like in Yi Qin's previous life. As for whether the novice region of the three eastern countries would be like in Yi Qin's previous life, where they could barely repel the Alliance army and reclaim their territory, no one knew. However, this wasn't important. What was important was that if the novice region of the three eastern countries was destroyed by the Alliance army, then the eastern players would have the same ending as the players of Jibian, Tintu, and the Polar Bear Empire that was about to be destroyed. In other words, they would completely disappear from the real world. Even if there were survivors, it would only be a minority. Moreover, they would be struggling at death's door. Chapter 922. Rumble. Tens of thousands of horses galloped and the earth rumbled. Since the Samsara Legion had joined the battle, the reincarnation Immortal City's army was able to charge forward without any hindrance. Soon, they slaughtered the Polar Bear army. In the sky, Yi Qin's divine sense covered the entire battlefield. He looked at Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Gao Shun, and the other generals and sent a telepathic message to them. Retreat 2,000 meters and stand by. Yes, my lord. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Li Yuanba, and the other generals bowed and saluted in unison. Then they led the reincarnation Immortal City's army and the Samsara Legion to retreat. Just as the reincarnation Immortal City's army retreated 2,000 meters, a huge hexagram formation lit up on the ground where the Polar Bear army had just died. In the sky, Yi Qin's divine sense covered the entire battlefield. When he saw this, he squinted his eyes. The Crusade army is here. Just as Yi Qin thought of this, groups of foreign players with blonde hair and blue eyes, wearing bright silver armor and white capes embroidered with scarlet crosses, walked out of the hexagram formation. They held square shields in their hands and long swords in their right hands. Then, they quickly stood in a square formation. At this moment, a group of players suddenly rushed out from the depths of the Polar Bear Empire. If one looked closely, it would not be difficult to recognize that these were the players who had just been slaughtered by the reincarnation Immortal City's army. The one leading the group was the burly Negev who had been trampled to death by the barbaric rhinoceros's hoof. Ha ha! Negev was not lying. The Crusade army is here. That's right. They are really here. We could take revenge now. Damn it. This time, I'm going to kill the Eastern players a few hundred times. I'm going to kill them until they kowtow and surrender. I think so too. Damn it, we were like ants just now, being killed by Yi Qin's armed forces. We have to take revenge no matter what. The Polar Bear Empire's players who had returned to the battlefield discussed and cheered excitedly because of the arrival of the Crusade army. When Yi Qin heard the excited cheers of the Polar Bear Empire's players, he sneered. At this moment, a man who was dressed as a priest from the Crusade army suddenly looked in the direction of the reincarnation Immortal City's army. Then, he waved his right hand, and a bright silver cross instantly appeared. In the next second, the foreign man who was dressed as a priest raised the silver cross and shouted, "Brother, I'm sorry. The holy light is with me." As soon as the foreign man finished speaking, the silver cross instantly burst out in white light. Then a milky white light shield appeared out of thin air and quickly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped the hexagram formation and the Crusaders who had already formed a square formation. Then it expanded again. It wasn't until the milky white light covered an area of 2 kilometers around the foreign man dressed as a priest that the milky white light cover stopped expanding. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the other generals frowned when they saw this scene. However, They didn't retreat or attack. They didn't give any orders to the army of reincarnation Immortal City either, because Yi Chen's order was to be on standby. In the sky, Yi Chen, whose divine sense had enveloped the entire battlefield, glanced at the milky white light shield that completely enveloped the Crusade army and narrowed his eyes. Putting up a protective shield as soon as they came out, they must have received a message from the battlefield. It seemed like the Pope still had a communication device. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. If you have it, then so be it. When I get to the Holy See, I'll take everything away. I'll keep what I can use and destroy what I can't. At the thought of this, Yi Chen waved his right hand, and a thick black god-slaying weapon appeared instantly. The defensive power of the protective barrier wasn't weak. Zhao Yinzheng, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, and the other generals, together with the army of reincarnation Immortal City, might not be able to shatter the white light barrier. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have summoned the god-slaying weapon. At the thought of this, Yi Chen raised the god-slaying weapon in his right hand and threw it at the milky white light shield below. With a buzzing sound, the dark and thick god-slaying weapon instantly turned into a black light, and then disappeared in a flash. In the next second, the god-slaying weapon, which had turned into a black light, pierced the milky white light shield. With a pop, the milky white light shield shattered instantly. Then, the bright silver cross in the priest's hand turned into dust with a boom. The priest, who was holding the cross, saw this and narrowed his eyes abruptly. Then, he looked up at the sky. Swish, swish. The sound of swords being unsheathed rang out in an instant. Then, a group of guards stood in front of the priest and raised their shields to the sky. When a man dressed as a priest saw this, he waved his hand and motioned for the guards to retreat. When the guards who had raised their shields to protect the divine talismans saw this, they returned to their original formation. At this moment, the man dressed as a priest suddenly bowed to the sky in a Western aristocratic greeting. Then, he opened his mouth and said, "John Lawrence greets you of Gojoseon." In the sky, Yi Chen, who had covered the entire battlefield with his divine sense, frowned when he heard this. At this moment, John Lawrence opened his mouth again. "You of Gojoseon, you're a guest. I'm afraid it's a little rude to avoid meeting you." After hearing John Lawrence's words, Yi Chen's killing intent soared to the sky. Damn it, he really thinks he's a big shot. No, this bastard must know the consequences of angering me. He's doing this on purpose. Thinking of this, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes and raised his left hand to grab at the air. In the next second, John Lawrence, who had wanted to meet Yi Chen, was instantly grabbed by an almost solid illusory hand and brought straight to the sky. Just as Yi Chen was about to grab John and Lawrence, his spiritual sense, which had been spreading out, suddenly saw a flash of madness in John and Lawrence's eyes. Sure enough, this bastard was deliberately angering me. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. In the next second, Yi Chen's left hand clenched into the air. Bang! John Lawrence, who had been whole just a moment ago, was instantly crushed. Then, pieces of flesh and blood splattered all over the sky. At the same time, 10 huge golden swords appeared out of thin air and slashed straight at Yi Chen. Ruling sword. Seeing this, Yi Chen smiled coldly. Damn the Pope. As expected, he was still as sinister as in his previous life. But you want to trick me? Damn it. You haven't cultivated enough yet. Chapter 923. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes narrowed. The Godslayer in his right hand smashed towards the giant golden sword formed by the ruling sword without hesitation. Boom! 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 After 10 earth-shattering explosions, the 10 giant golden swords formed by the ruling swords exploded. Then, countless small golden light swords flew straight towards Yi Chen. In the next second, there was an intense collision sound. Ding, ding, ding. The small golden light swords created by the explosion of the 10 ruling swords stabbed Yi Chen. However, without exception, they were all blocked by Yi Chen's strong body. Seeing this, Yi Chen's eyes widened. Now is the time. Just as Yi Chen thought of this, there was an intense explosion sound. The small golden light swords that were blocked by Yi Chen's strong body all exploded. Then, they turned into white flames and directly enveloped Yi Chen. At this moment, an extremely hot temperature suddenly exploded. In the blink of an eye, the white clouds under Yi Chen's feet were directly burned into nothingness. At the same time, a huge white fireball appeared in the sky. On the ground, where the Crusaders were. The Crusaders had already been teleported over. When they saw this, they clenched their right hands into fists and hammered their left chest. Bang, bang, bang. After the intense collision sound, there was a frenzied shout. The holy light is with us. In the next second, hallelujah, which was sometimes low and sometimes high, followed closely behind. Hallelujah, where the polar bear players were. What is that ball of light? Could it be the Son of God? It's possible. Otherwise, why would the Crusaders suddenly be so solemn and so devout? It should be. Don't forget that the protective shield created by the priest was pierced by a weapon. Moreover, the priest was also caught in the sky and crushed. This means that Yi Chen has a strong person on his side. But now look, there's no danger. Instead, there's only a white fireball in the sky. That must be it. Otherwise, the Crusaders would definitely be attacked. They would not be like this, safe and sound. They can even continue to sing. With a reincarnation immortal city army was Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Huang Sheng, and the other generals, as well as the 41 million reincarnation immortal city guards behind them, looked up at the huge white fireball in the sky. At this moment, a suffocating, murderous intent rose from the group of generals and the guards of the reincarnation immortal city. Zhang San, who had the most explosive temper, upon seeing the huge white fireball in the sky, his eyes immediately became bloodshot. He then looked at the Crusade army and roared with incomparable ruthlessness, "Stop! How dare they attack our Lord? I'm going to crush all those bastard barbarians into pieces. Leave no one alive." After Zhang San roared, Zhao Yun, Guan Er, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the other generals tightened their grip on their weapons. Then, they roared with bloodshot eyes, "Kill them all. Leave no bodies intact. Kill, kill, kill." The roar, which was filled with anger and murderous intent, resounded through the sky. It caused the sky to change color and the air to vibrate. At this moment, a green gas, which was filled with murderous intent and a strong wood-based aura, flew out from the generals and guards of the reincarnation immortal city army. Then it gathered in one place and rushed up to the sky in the blink of an eye. There was not much of the green gas, but when it gathered in one place, it blocked out the sun. The moment the green gas appeared in the sky, a dragon's roar, which seemed to have gone through the ages, suddenly sounded. Roar. The roar was loud and clear, filled with murderous intent. It was extremely penetrating and spread over thousands of miles in the blink of an eye. At the location of the Crusaders, the solemn and stirring singing stopped in an instant. Then, the guards of the crusade all looked up at the sky at the same time, at the green ball of chi. What's that? I've heard a similar sound. It seems to be the sound of the dragon god in the legends of the East. How is that possible? In this world, only our Lord is the real God. How can there be a God in the East? What should we do now? Should we attack directly, or let's wait for a while? The Archbishop and the Mage Legion have not teleported here yet. At the location of the polar bear players. Damn it, I think I heard a dragon's roar just now. The roar of the dragon god in the East. You heard it right. Damn it, I heard it too. How is that possible? Is there really a dragon god in the East? It's hard to say. There is the god of light in the West and the dragon god in the East. It's not impossible, damn it. If there is a dragon god in the East, won't our polar bear empire be destroyed? What's there to worry about? So what if there's a dragon god in the East? Don't forget, the god of light is the omnipotent God who creates everything. Don't worry. Didn't you see that the Crusaders were not afraid of the dragon's roar? What does this mean? It's very simple. The Crusaders are confident. Yeah, it's just a dragon's roar. There's nothing to be afraid of. Whether the so-called dragon god in the east can come out or not is another matter. At the location of the eastern players. F***CK. What I just hear? A dragon's roar? You heard it right. I heard it too. Don't you guys feel like you've seen this scene somewhere before? Nonsense. How could we not have seen it before? Back then, tens of millions of people surrounded Yu of Gojoseon to snatch Shan Wan. But Yu of Gojoseon single-handedly killed hundreds of thousands of people. Then, Yu of Gojoseon's subordinate, Dian Xiong, led an army to protect him. Wasn't there a tiger's roar? I also saw that scene. TSK. After the roar, an incomparably huge white tiger appeared. What the F***CK? The white tiger killed a large number of people with one strike. That's called a tragic sight. F***CK. If I had known, I would have gone to take a look. If you had gone, you might have been killed by Yu of Gojoseon. You should be glad that you didn't go that day. Do you guys think a dragon will appear this time? I feel like the chances are very high. Just as the players and the Crusaders were discussing the sudden appearance of the dragon's roar in the sky, the green cloud in the sky started to distort again and again. In the next second, a gigantic azure dragon with azure scales over 100,000 feet long suddenly appeared in the sky. Roar! The dragon's roar reverberated again. Then, the huge green dragon suddenly landed and enveloped the reincarnation Immortal City's army and the generals. At this moment, the system notification rang in Yi Chen's mind. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen. Reincarnation Immortal City's army has comprehended the Khanate Battle Formation, Green Dragon Battle Formation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.